in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our church. Amen. May start.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Leader Majority.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, November 30th, 2017. The list of nominees to 5 National Government Constituency Development Fund Committee from the National Government Constituency Development Fund Board. 2, Center for Advocacy Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, observation report on the repeat presidential elections in Kenya, October 2017. 3, the annual report and financial statements of the University of Eldoret for the year that ended 30th June 2016. The report of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year that ended 30th June 2017 and the certificate therein. 1, the Central Bank of Kenya, and 2, East Africa Portland Company Limited. Number 5, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year that ended 30th June 2016 and the certificate therein. And these are Kenyatta International Convention Center and Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Number 6, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following constituencies for the year that ended 30th June 2016 and the certificate therein. Makueni Constituency, Kitui West Constituency, Kitui Rural Constituency, Kitui South Constituency, Kitui Central Constituency, Turkana Central, Endabes Constituency, Kapsaret Constituency, Turkana West Constituency, Tharaka Constituency, Manyata Constituency, Kapenguria Constituency, and Kilifi North and Soy constituencies. Number 7, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Uwezo Fund Oversight Board for the year that ended 30th June 2015 and the certificate therein. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, statements.
Leader Majority.
Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44, subsection 2A, on behalf of the House Business Committee, I rise to give the following statements. The House Business Committee met on Wednesday this week to give priority to the business of the House. The House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker, has prioritized the following business for consideration next week. On Tuesday, the House is scheduled to consider 1, the appointment of members to the Committee on Selection, 2, the appointment of members to the Committee on Appointments, and 3, the appointment of members to the Procedure and House Rules Committee. Mr. Speaker, after the appointments have been approved by the House, it is envisaged that we will consider the report of the Committee on Selection on the proposal for appointments to members to various committees. The House will also receive, Mr. Speaker, and is important, and consider the report of the Procedure and House Rules Committee on the proposed amendments to the standing orders relating to the membership of members to various committees. And in this report, Mr. Speaker, we expect that every member of the august House will serve in 2 committees, one departmental and one select. In the same week, Mr. Speaker, we will also continue with the second reading of the following bills: the Public Trustee Amendment Bill 2017, the Copyright Amendment Bill 2017, should we not conclude them today. For the purpose of correcting the House records, may I inform the House, Mr. Speaker, that I have since withdrawn the Energy Bill, National Assembly Bill number 41 of 2017, and the Petroleum Exploration and Production Bill, National Assembly Bill number 41 of 2017, pursuant to Standing Order 140, and this is to allow for the republication and presentation of those bills afresh to the House. Through you, Mr. Speaker, may I also bring to the attention of the House that in accordance with the calendar of the House and Standing Order 27, subsection 1, it is expected that the House may either go on long recess next week on Friday or alter the calendar of the House to extend its session of this year, should there be any urgent business from the executive, though this is a matter to be discussed by the House Business Committee that you chair, and we shall give the way forward. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to lay this statement on behalf of the House Business Committee on the table of the House.
Very well.
Order number 8, motion, designating service lanes for emergency vehicles.
Honourable members, you don't do that, yes. Honourable members, debate on this motion was concluded yesterday, and what remained was for the question to be put, which I hereby do. That aware that the capacity of highways and urban roads in the country.
Reporters and media staff who deal with issues of court cases could have some element of law so that they understand. And I think the leader of majority of the country that CDF is here to stay. And unlike what the leader reports were all about. Because Peter, I think it is important to understand that the CDF Act 2013 was actually repealed. It does not exist anymore. What we have is the LD CDF Act. And in view of the court ruling, all of the House needs to do very simple. Amend the law to align it with the court ruling, and then the CDF continues. Yes, I think the country needs to understand that CDF is just to stay, and the role of members of parliament, all the senators and governors like it or not, will remain in that. Thank you.
Just a moment.
Been approved by this House, Mr. Speaker, because we have already received some messages from the carer that we also need to constitute the carer boards, and it forms part, the carer board forms part of the CDFC, Mr. Speaker, so I support.
So you say you are receiving reports about
that
what?
Those constituencies which we had approved in this House, Mr. Speaker, their names to be cascaded so that work can start.
That's what the leader majority said, that that's going to be done tomorrow. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to comment on
education, in terms of bursary, in terms of giving those small centers to the local man. Honorable Speaker, even giving women the contracts to do these jobs, it's really empowering our people. So, Honorable Speaker, the noises that we are hearing outside there, that CDF is not doing very well. Those noises, Honorable Speaker, are just noises are there to interrupt or distract the work of CDF. Honorable Speaker, another thing that we need to raise is that the committee that we have, the committees have selected, we need to quicken their process because, Honorable Speaker, very soon we are going for long recess. It will be very boring to be in the constituency without going around to see the projects of CDF. So we are actually challenging the majority leader to make sure that the funds are there so that when we go for long all day, we see the development going on. With those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
Member for Tharaka. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support the motion. As we said last time, it is very important that we constitute these committees without much ado because the funding from the Treasury is long overdue and it is the high time members of Parliament went to do their mandate. It is the high time that the board is allocated money by the Treasury because the last time we made inquiries, we were told, in fact, the money has not left Treasury and it has not gone to the board. Therefore, as we pass these lists in the motion today, it is my humble prayer to the Treasury that money should be allocated to the board and the board should be able to allocate money to the various constituencies. I therefore support.
Member for Ugunja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me add my voice to this debate. And from the outset, Mr. Speaker, I want to support the motion. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be gainsaid. In fact, Mr. Speaker, CDF is the pioneer devolved fund in this country. And it is also not in doubt that CDF has had much bigger impact in terms of development than perhaps most of our county governments have had. So, Speaker, there are two issues I want to speak to. One is the assurance by the Honorable Duale that these names of the various committees would be gazetted tomorrow or so by the Attorney General's office. So, Speaker, that is good enough. But then, Mr. Speaker, given the bureaucracy we have in government, my apprehension is that we may end up going for Christmas and starting a new year without these funds actually being in the accounts of the various constituency committees. Mr. Speaker, from experience, once the AG gazettes or causes its names to be gazetted, the Treasury will take its sweet time to release the funds to the CDF board. The CDF board will also take time to release its funds to the constituency accounts. And after that, you will also have some time waiting for the AIEs to be released. The Speaker, my view would have been that if there is anything that should make this House not go on recess, is the matter of the disbursement of the CDF funds. Mr. Speaker, I need to inform the Honorable Duale that I have never resisted development. What I resist is bad governance and autocracy. Mr. Speaker, this House must put its foot down and demand that these monies be disbursed, not only by the Treasury but by the CDF board before it can even imagine going on recess. If you don't do so, I want to caution my new colleagues, you will be in trouble. Come January, when everybody will be on the doorsteps looking for bursaries. The Speaker, the second thing I want to speak to is the matter that was raised by Honorable Washiali, my good friend and neighbor, Honorable Washiali. The Speaker, the purpose of the constituency oversight committees has now been negated. Mr. Speaker, it was a great oversight on the part of the CDF committee under Mheshimiwa Lesonet to have failed to put in place a mechanism to facilitate these constituency oversight committees to enable them to function properly. Mr. Speaker, an oversight committee cannot play its oversight role without facilitation. These committees actually exist at the mercy of the MPs. I'm sorry to say so. They don't even have money to move from one point to the next. So one of the things that the new CDF committee should undertake as a matter of urgency is to ensure that there is a proper mechanism for the facilitation of the constituency oversight committees to enable the CDF funds to function properly, Mr. Speaker. By so doing, they will be helping, in fact, the Office of the Auditor General in making their work much easier, because most of the work that office does is as a result of perhaps not lack of proper oversight at the constituency level. Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, I want to support this motion and pray that these monies are released as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Imenti South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity also to give my sentiments on this motion. I want to, on the onset, to support this motion, Mr. Speaker. I hope this is the last batch of the constituencies which were left behind. And I hope now that all the constituencies have been given out, now the gazettement will be done as the Honorable Majority Leader has promised. But Mr. Speaker, also what is very key, again, this House should do, is to constitute the House committees, Mr. Speaker. The two leadership of this House should move with the speed. May put any differences aside if there is any, which I'm not aware. Necessary to, not necessarily actually Treasury. I want to blame Treasury, as my colleagues have put it clearly, that the Treasury is really failing Kenyans, and I think this time round, I think things should not move as usual. I was happy to hear the President during his speech during the swearing-in ceremony, putting to task all the civil servants, because these people are really failing Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. And from this year, I hope, as this House, we should really put our foot together, both the sides of the political divide, so that we can put the executive to task, because we must deliver our service to our people, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you see now we are going to January. Actually, it is very uneven now to sit at the constituency, even at your house. I don't know the other members, because people are coming from bursaries. December is tomorrow, the 1st of December. And many students will be going, Mr. Speaker, for Form 1 next January, Form 2, 3, and these people need bursaries. It will be very impractical, even if we gazette these members, to get the money disbursed to from Treasury to the bond, and the bond then to the constituencies. So, Mr. Speaker, I think, Honorable Ndwara, Majority Leader, you should really push this. I trust your leadership, and we know you can be able to push these, the Treasury mandarins to release this money as fast as possible to get to the constituencies. I support Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
I'm seeing a request, as you can see where the mic is, and seeing a request by the Leader Minority has not quite familiarized himself with Article 108 of the Constitution. When you make a request, all your other subjects must just relax, because you take precedence.
Thank you.
Yes, all of them should relax. You take precedence. I can see many of them winking at me, and they were wondering why it is that I'm giving, because I saw a request from the leader of the minority party, and you take precedence of all of them. So, you know, please, when you make your request, remain around. Very well, proceed, Honorable John Bandi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the honor that is bestowed in my position by the standing orders. And I want to thank and ask my colleagues from the minority side who also have shown confidence in me to lead them as the leader of minority. I don't take it for granted. Mr. Speaker, I want to make my contribution to this motion on the appointments to committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, I want to first start by thanking the members of the committees of these constituencies, the selection committees, which came up with these names so that we can have all the constituencies. I know a number of constituencies have been approved, I think well over 170, and now we have additional ones. But I want to, before going to the details of these appointments, I want to talk about the National Government Constituency Development Fund and its impact on the development of this country. It is my pleasure also to recognize, because I was worried at one point that CDF, as we used to know it, was almost dying when this matter was still in court. But I thank God that the court so sense that the objective of the National Government Constituency Development Fund is still relevant. It is still relevant because we still have national government functions which are being performed even with the devolution. Devolution has just devolved some functions, but has left some functions at the national level. And we still need, and it is still relevant, very relevant, to have specific approach and targeted funding of those national government functions like education, like security, among others. And when the courts did rule that this concept of CDF is not unconstitutional, but probably we needed to make amendments to streamline it with the Constitution, I said, I think I agree with the judiciary completely. Mr. Speaker, looking at the transformation that CDF has brought to the grassroots development in this country, I think no one in his right or her right senses would dispute that CDF has made a contribution, and a positive contribution. Those of us who are keen to remember the pre-CDF period and the post-CDF period, even if you do not like the fund, you will agree that this fund has made a contribution in this country. I also know that there are a number of instances and areas where this fund has been misappropriated, just like any other fund in this country. And those areas of misappropriation, we want to talk to the institutions like the Office of the Auditor General, like Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, to ensure that funds that are appropriated by this House and voted to go and implement specific programs at the grassroots level really actually reach the grassroots. The problem is not just with the CDF as it is, the problem is even more with county funds. We would want to see the billions of shillings that are being devolved to the counties. And I hope that we are even going to devolve more to the counties to spur economic growth. But as we do that, we want to ask the management of these funds at the grassroots level, at the county levels, to be alive to the fact that these funds are being allocated to help inspire economic growth at the grassroots level, not to line the pockets of a few individuals who are privileged to be in a position to access these funds. Mr. Speaker, the reason why at times we fight so hard to have national government leadership is because of this perception that when you get to national government leadership, that you will access resources that probably we would otherwise not access if your party or your president of choice or your candidate of choice is in power. If we devolve properly, if we devolve not just at the county level, but we devolve even the national government funds, the national government functions, if we devolve them properly with the resources following these programs, so that every region feels properly catered for, that resources are being received at the counties, at the constituencies, regardless of who is in power, then the focus will shift from the asking or wanting a person from your place or your party to be the president. We will now be more objective, and we will start thinking of who is he or she. If we vote to be the president of this country and the deputy president, we would bake a bigger cake for this country. We will not now be talking about sharing of the cake, but baking of a bigger cake. And then we will now be more objective even in our decisions. so that we avoid this unnecessary antagonism. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask that let us not just think of devolving CDF in terms of percentages. Let us objectively calculate the functions that CDF is supposed to implement in our constituencies. If it is education, how much do we want to allocate for primary schools to improve the infrastructure? How much do we want to allocate to secondary schools to improve the infrastructure? How much do we want to put for our security? How much do we want to put for these functions, the specific functions that we want the CDF to help us implement? Then once we get the amount, we can now then budget and allocate that amount to the CDF to be shared to those constituencies. But just putting arbitrary amounts at times sounds very fuzzy, but you see, by the end of the day, it is all about implementation and service delivery to our people. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that if we utilize CDF properly, and I hope no one will take offense with this, sometimes you ask yourself, when you watch news, you see some schools, some children still are sitting under trees. That in some schools, in this era of CDF, that some children are still doing exams in mud-walled houses, classrooms. Mr. Speaker, to me, it is a shame for us as leaders from that area. And I'm being very careful. I'm not saying member of parliament, because as a matter of fact, CDF is not supposed to be administered and managed by members of parliament as it is today. We therefore are speaking to the committees in those constituencies. Get your priorities right. There is no reason why you should start, you know, there is this obsession with starting many secondary schools. Why should you start secondary school in an area where children are still learning under a tree? Why do you buy buses? I see this craziness. People buying buses, CDF buying buses everywhere, left, right, and center. You are buying buses to give to students who are sitting on stones. I think to me, that is misplaced priority. So what in a nutshell I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleading to those committees, I'm not pleading to my colleagues here. You are no longer in charge of CDF. Even the courts affirmed the same. If you try to touch CDF, you will be in trouble, you will be jailed. So you are no longer in charge of CDF. Those committees which are in charge of CDFs should make sure that they prioritize the needs of those areas properly. As members of parliament, I still insist that the law we passed, giving ourselves the powers to oversight CDF, that must be implemented. Mr. Speaker, I say so because one of the reasons why CDF has succeeded more than any other fund is because these politicians are more accountable. Because even if you joke, after 5 years, by the way, we have seen people, and I will not name names, who had issues with managing CDFs when it was in our hands, in their constituencies. They are not here. Majority of them served one term, voted out. So if you also want to follow suit, then sit there and relax. Because CDF, even as the legal framework takes it away from you, perception of the members of the public is still you are in charge. And therefore, you need to oversight this money properly. And if we are going to oversight, that committee which we created, called Oversight Committee, I don't know how it died. Because I thought we were supposed to form a committee that would oversight this fund. Whoever is going to be the chair, and I hope Honorable Lasanet will not be the chair again of this committee. Whoever is going to be the chair, please be active enough to make the monitoring of this fund vibrant. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that if there is any money that needs to be properly ring-fenced, it is CDF. But I don't want to conclude without mentioning something about the Senate and its oversighting role on the county funds. I think this time round, I want to plead with our brothers in the Senate to take their work even more seriously. Mr. Speaker, if it is lack of funds, which is making senators not perform this function of oversighting, And I'm speaking to you now, Mr. Speaker, as the chairman of the Parliamentary Service Commission. I think we need, as the House, during the budget-making process, to provide some money to the Senate, to have oversight role on these our counties. I'm telling you, whatever is happening in counties is a shame, and we cannot let it go the way it is. You cannot have a simple clerk who is earning less than 200,000 in a county building hotels in 2-3 years. And by the way, and they are very poor because, you know, most of them also didn't go to school even to learn business. They even build hotels in their homes in the rural areas where there are no customers. So you find someone putting up a serious hotel, a hotel that should be built either in Mombasa for domestic tourism, or even or built in Naivasha, or built in Nairobi. Someone has put a huge hotel in his home in Waondo, in Super North constituency. I'm not saying my brother here has put up one, but I'm just giving that example, that how on earth would you have a clerk working 8 hours in an office, not doing any business that you can see, and putting up a huge hotel here, putting up another one, putting up houses for 3 wives. Immediately they got these jobs, they married 2 more wives, and then they are concubines. So, and then vehicles, a fleet of them, and you know, you look at them, you ask yourself, are these people serious? That is why most of these governors, Mr. Speaker, if you noticed, they struggled to win their second term. And I'm telling you, if they were going for a 3rd term, unfortunately, we had put maximum is 2 terms. Now, I just pray that this, their second term, they don't do more damage, because now they are not going to seek re-election. I don't know, maybe God will protect us. But before God comes in, Auditor General, Ethics and Anti-Corruption, please save us from this wanton theft of public funds. Finally, the national government, I don't want to talk much because I know I cannot talk to a government that is still not clearly in place. But the government will be in place. You know, even if you say, yeah, now, even those who believe, Mr. Speaker, even those who believe that President was sworn in, still know there is no cabinet. There will be a cabinet soon. So those of us who don't expect cabinet, we know there is no president that has been sworn in. In fact, we are soon expecting another very serious swearing in, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Well, of course, the leader minority has not been in the chamber, so this was like a maiden speech. So, and it was fair that he also touches his pet subject, which he concluded with. He is entitled to his own views, and there's nothing wrong with that. Member for Tetu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support this motion, especially on approval of the various.
Raise up your voice.
Yes,
just like we do in a public rally, you know, everybody. Somebody who has campaigned for in a constituency should be able to be hand in a chamber.
I rise to support this motion on approval of nominees to various constituency committees on National Government Constitution Development Fund. And one thing that I would wish to say is that following the previous approvals on the names on the committees, I think it has taken quite some time for gazettement of the previous names. And as you look, we are now 3 months since we got into this office, and people back there on our constituencies are really asking, what are we doing? Because the expectations are very high, and they expect that by now there should be CDF officials who can be able to manage the various projects. There are some which are pending, there are some which are already undergoing, and I think first and foremost, there is also a need to harmonize the various provisions in the Act, especially following the ruling by the Supreme Court, where I think there have been two rulings. There was the first one that declared some provisions in the CDF Act as unconstitutional. And then previously, we have had the recent ruling by the Supreme Court, where it was very clear that members of parliament have no role to play, especially with the CDF Development Fund. So what I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that we need to come up with clear rules, with clear provisions that should not be challenged by the courts. And first of all, I would wish to say that we have three arms of government. We have the legislature, we have the judiciary, and I think each and every arm of the government should play its role without interfering with the other. Because we have seen situations where this House would pass some laws, but the other arm of the government would declare those laws unconstitutional, null and void. So my take is that I support the approval of the nominees, and I expect that by tomorrow all the names should be gazetted so that we can move to the next level of initiating projects as we promised our citizens and our electorates. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Very well. Member for Saboti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this time. I'm informed by my colleague here that making the first speech is called a maiden speech. So do I go ahead and start? Proceed is my maiden speech.
Proceed. You are not to be interrupted.
For how many hours?
You have not even read the standing orders. What have you been doing for 3 months?
Okay,
Proceed. You have only 10 minutes. You have only 10 minutes, member for Saboti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise first to support the motion, but before that, I will make my maiden speech as you have allowed me. And I'll start by thanking the people of Saboti for electing me as a member of parliament. For the sake of my colleagues here, my names are Caleb Amisi Luyai, representing the people of Saboti constituents, Trans Nzoia. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you realize I'm fairly young, and I really want to thank the people of Saboti for having faith. At my age, I'm only turning 30 next month. I may be one of the youngest people here. So, yeah, thank you for the applause. Now, I'm a man of few words. I believe in action, so I may not speak for much here. I will circulate my speech to the rest of the members of parliament here. The full speech will be availed to you. I'm a man of action, so I realize this is a house of words. But in support of the motion, I don't want to go into speeches. I'll be breaking my speeches as we go on in the rest of the sittings. I don't want to bore so many our members here because of speeches that are written down by secretaries. I want to go straight to the motion. I have a problem particularly with this CDF Act. Where I come from, I represent a rural constituency. And when you talk of a Mheshimiwa is a member of parliament, that is what the people understand. This idea of county government is still a new concept to them. In fact, when you have to question about development in your area, they'll not even talk about the governor. They'll talk about Mheshimiwa. And the Mheshimiwa in our language means member of parliament. That's what they are used to. So I will, maybe going forward, when we'll be making the budget, I will request the allocation for the CDF to be increased. And this is the reason. In fact, my predecessor went home because of CDF. He's my friend, a good friend, a good person, gentleman, but he had to go home because of CDF. And not because he managed, because the functions of the CDFs were limited. And for example, in my case, when you promise so many people on boreholes and the bridges that are dilapidated, and you realize the CDF is not even able to, the act is confined to some functions, and others are confined to the county government. And you realize some of our governors are misusing and misappropriating funds. You can see a governor can afford to steal a generator, but even if an MP tried to steal even a pen, you'll be recognized. So the focus is on a member of parliament. And probably going forward, we are either giving allocation, more allocation to the CDF, or we are actually devolving further the county funds to the CDF, accounts, so that we have enough funds to give to our people. Most of us, we are here, we are doing projects on the ground before we came, and the constituents expect you to continue with the high-profile projects we've been doing. The CDF cannot come in. It's not enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that long speech.
You haven't even taken 5 minutes. I think you need to improve then. Member for Larry. Member for Larry? You want to have many hours?
No. I've had my maiden speech before, so I just wanted to stand and support the motion. Thank you, Bwana Speaker, for giving me that chance. I'm concerned because of this gazettement. It is taking too long, considering that my constituency, Larry constituency, has only one road, the highway. All the other roads are Kera roads, and I cannot even constitute the Kera committee, because the Kera committee, the 4 members are supposed to come from the CDF committee, which is gazetted. While I'm waiting for the gazettement and the rain is doing havoc to my roads, the people in my constituency are saying Mheshimiwa is not doing anything. I'm starting to find a lot of war in the first month of my tenure. So why I'm supporting is the leader. We need this thing gazetted as up, because it is really putting a lot of pressure to us. We also need to put people in place of working. We had a lot of people campaigning for us, and we need them to start seeing what we are doing. So I rise to support, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Sorry. Member for Matungulu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I don't know who changed my mic, but it's a wild small. But I'll try my level best to calm down. I want to onset support this motion. But I want to ask members, I'm a bit perturbed when I hear members saying that we don't have a role in CDF. My friends, honorable members, if you want to go home in 2022, joke with CDF. We must be in charge, and you must give direction on what will happen in your constituency. You cannot be a member of parliament and sit down there and assume a committee will do.
What's the point of order, leader majority?
Mr. Speaker, the law has not given us a role in CDF. And Honorable Member for Matungulu, I think you are misleading the public and the House that we must be in charge of CDF. I don't know about you, but at least I am not in charge of CDF Garissa Township. I am supposed to over an oversight role.
Mr. Speaker, I doubt whether the honorable member, leader of majority, was listening to me. My point is very clear, honorable member. Your role is oversight. And oversight includes even at CDF level. Because CDF is money which is coming from the national government. And the law is very clear. The rules and the laws of members of parliament, it's 3: oversight, legislation, and representation. Unless, Mr. Speaker, the leader of majority is not understanding what I'm talking about. I want to say very clearly, as a member of parliament, you must provide oversight within your constituency to give clear prudence of money used within that constituency. And it is most important, Mr. Speaker, to know that if there is a devolved function in this country which is working and the common mwananchi is appreciating, is CDF. So, Mr. Speaker, one thing we need to do as a members of parliament is to find a way on how to increase that allocation, Mr. Speaker. Because this is the money you can oversight and is going direct to your electorate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have been given a room here by the courts whereby they have given us a room to harmonize the 2013 Act and the 2015 Act, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, I will be proposing amendment to increase the allocation on CDF when we are harmonizing that, to make sure that we are able to reach every corner of our constituency without thinking of governors, without thinking of the national government. Mr. Speaker, CDF, it is only fund which recognize that low-income Kenyan who cannot take their kids to school. And if the funds are limited, members of parliament, please, and you cannot cater for all the families in your constituency, we must increase this fund. We are complaining here, Mr. Speaker, that governors are overspending and misappropriating funds at the county government. Yet, we know very well, you can increase the number of the money for CDF in this house and create a proper oversight for the same money to benefit Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we support this motion, I want to urge the board of CDF board and the treasury, please, can you release the arrears of CDF allocation for 2016-2017 and make arrangements to make sure that we have this money even before we go to recess. I want to support Honorable Wandai, Mr. Speaker. For members of parliament who are new, by January, every parent will be in your doorstep. Now, the only savior we have is to have CDF money to give these parents money for bursaries to take their kids back to college, Mr. Speaker. It is important, Mr. Speaker, we realize our role as oversight, but it should not be misunderstood by the Kenyans that we don't have any say or we don't have any role on how to deal and give direction in our constituency. We have been elected by Kenyans to give direction in those constituencies. If you have been elected by over 50% plus, 60% plus, the Kenyans down there, they expect you to give direction. So, Mr. Speaker, it is high time this House raise above board. And we make sure that CDF is one fund which must be strengthened, the allocation must be increased, and we do oversight without fear or favor of anybody in our constituency. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Member for Central Menti.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wake up to support the motion on grounds that CDF is a very important money which comes to mwananchi. Mr. Speaker, the money allocated to CDF in the constituencies, especially the money which I've been seeing in my constituency, is not adequate at all. I'm praying that for the money which comes to the constituencies so low, and taking into account what is taking place in the county government and what is being done by MCAs and even the governor, it's good if this money can be doubled. And when this money is doubled, Mr. Speaker, sir, is going to equalize all Kenyans, and we will not hear of some places or some counties, some people saying that they are being marginalized. Because as we speak now, the problem we are facing in this country, what we hear from Kasarani to Jacaranda and many other places when there are meetings, we usually hear some people saying that they are being marginalized and developments are not taking place in their constituencies. But if we are going to have this money being doubled in the constituencies, I'm very sure even in the places where we are seeing students running under the trees, especially in these island areas, more so a place called Tiati, because this is what is coming in the TV now and then, we are going to have grasses. I'm not saying that the present member for Tiati is not working, but there was a previous one, whereby we have been seeing students and teachers being taught under the trees. So, Mr. Speaker, as for me, as I support this motion, it is my humble prayer that the chair be checking on the new members, because we came together with a number of members who are more senior than me in this house, and we placed our accounts together. They were considered earlier. We had a meeting which we were supposed to attend, Mr. Speaker, sir, but they went. They were given and they went, so I stayed for quite a long time. And this is my second time since I came in this house, and I've been attending it on daily basis. And they put me the card. So I'm praying that we'll be considered more, so that at least we can be so much familiar with what is taking place around. Because the moment we are just left out, it may take a lot of time for one to familiarize ourselves with what takes place in this house. But that notwithstanding, what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that as it was said by a certain member, and I saw that it was not taken seriously, the release of 2016-2017 CDF money is very important, because those people in the offices now, they are working without getting a pay. And they have refused to move from the offices because they have not been paid. So as we constitute these new competencies which have been put in, and which we are waiting for them to be gazetted, we have that trouble that the previous workers are still in the office. And they are there. They are there because they have not been paid. Mr. Speaker, I'm praying for the Speaker's attention, and it's very important if I can be listened to. Yes. What we are saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that this release of 2016-2017 money.
Honourable member, I'll give you more time, eh?
Yes.
Don't worry, but allow me to make this announcement. Before we went to the last, when we had the last sitting, when we adjourned for 3 weeks, I did indicate that those members who will not be coming with their cards will not get a chance to contribute. So please don't come to plead with me to allow you to speak if you forgot your card. Even if you just forgot, not lost, even if you just forgot, please don't waste your time coming to plead with the chair to allow you to speak. There are several of you who have placed requests. Those are the ones I'm able to see. And just like, although the member is complaining,
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He may not know that people come and immediately they sit here, they put in their requests. So please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand, and I'm very happy for the correction. But what I'm trying to say, Mr. Speaker, is that as we speak in this house today, the people who are in the offices from some constituencies before last election, which are meant as to be in this house, are still working in those offices because they have not been paid their dues. For the money of 2016-2017, last bunch has not been released. And they cannot move from those offices because they don't know they are going to fall, and they have been told that CDF does not work in debt. We have tried to inquire, and it has been said that CDF does not incur debts. And it finished with the period which the previous MP was sitting in that office. And as for that, they have said that they are going to move from those offices the moment they are going to be paid, and they can't be paid with nothing. So we are praying that CDF last bunch be released, so that at least we can clear with them, and they can give us a chance at least to have a new staff and the supporting staff in those offices. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I will hereby support this motion because I believe it's good for the public and it's good for everybody else in Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kitutu Church, is it north or south? South. You can contribute from there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it's an honor for you to allow me to interrupt the normal procedure in the House for the simple reason that I've not been given my card, and that was simply because I was sworn in yesterday. I also wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm actually quite happy to be in this House once again for the third time. I've just been here 15 years, Mr. Speaker, and I hope it will be the last time that I'm going to be in this House. Mr. Speaker, the motion that has been introduced here, for me, it's a very interesting motion. One, I support it. I've listened to the contributions of my friends, and I wanted to make a few points so that some of them can actually understand what it is. I'm the only MP in this House who had a case in court for 9 years because of CDF. And the argument at that time was that I had actually misused public money, but I want to inform my friend who's shouting from the other side that I won the case and somebody's going to pay me handsomely because I did not pilfer the money and I did not misuse the money. It was a political case. So I'm informing my colleagues in this House that you must understand that CDF is a political fund. Even when the law says that you are not involved, you will be held responsible when the fund is misused. Number two, I wanted to tell my colleagues in this House, Mr. Speaker, that I am actually in this House because of CDF. Kitutu Church South constituency is one of the best CDF utilizing constituencies in Kenya. We are rated at about number 7 in the country. In Nyanza, I'm actually number 2. And if you see the projects we have done, you will be proud of them. The voters of Kitutu Church South voted for me overwhelmingly because of that development history. I would like to persuade my colleagues in this House that, as Mheshimiwa Bandi stated here, if you misuse that money or if you have anything to do with its misuse, or the public gets an impression that you have actually had anything to the misuse of that money, you will not come back to this House. The reason for that is that the public is very sensitive. The CDF fund is amongst the best funds in this country. History will be very kind to former President Kibaki, because as the person who introduced this fund with the other colleagues who are in this parliament, it is a fund that has done Kenyans proud. Mr. Speaker, the problems that many of my colleagues may not understand is that the fund has got issues with procurement. And you have to be very careful to follow the procurement rules and regulations, but on occasion we have had to sidestep some of those regulations to implement. Because as you are aware, the procurement rules and regulations have got certain issues which up to now are quite substantive. But once you elect and select, and the public selects the committee members, and the committee members are able to work diligently with you, the public will always reward you because of your oversight role and because of the work you do, and they always appreciate. I also had my colleague, Mr. Mbandi, leader of minority, say that he doesn't understand why people buy buses. The truth is, once I was done with most of my secondary schools, I've actually had to buy about 21 buses for my schools. The teachers are very, very happy about it. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, the next thing I want to do is that now I'm moving to my primary schools, and I intend to make sure that all the 42 primary schools I have will have minibuses, because for us who come from the rural areas, our students and children need to travel to Nairobi, need to travel to Mombasa, so that they are exposed as Kenyans, so that they are able to receive the same mental capacity of understanding that the environment they are in is not necessarily where they were condemned to stay permanently. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, when some of these buses were bought, some of my schools actually did very well in performance. In other words, the mood improved and the teachers and the students were very happy about it. And Mr. Speaker, one of the other issues I wanted to mention to my colleagues is that the members that you are going to appoint, the members that are going to be appointed as members of these committees are so important, because once they start handling the money, if they do not trust you and you don't trust them, I assure you, you will be having a lot of problems on how the money has been used. Even when you may go for your oversighting and you find that money has been misappropriated, you will be told that the money was misappropriated because of one or two items, and then when you report to the CID, they will tell you that you have to go to the efficiency monitoring unit, which then will tell you they will come to your school or your constituency after about 3 years, and you understand what the implications are. But I also want to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, what some of my colleagues have said, that there is nothing that has benefited our people better than the amount which is allocated for the bursaries, because some of our parents are very, very poor, and the bursaries have come in handy for the students to go to colleges and get higher education. And I wanted to mention, Mr. Speaker, that even when CDF has had challenges, legal or otherwise, it is a fund that members of this House must secure and must protect jealously. Because if you look at the mistake that happened when the Constitution was being drafted, the levels of devolution, you have the county government and then you came down to the county, to the ward. They forgot about the constituency. Now, the national government Constituency Development Fund fills that gap. And if you allow yourselves, as somebody mentioned, the public doesn't even know what governors are doing. The public doesn't know what the MCAs are doing. But the public knows what the member of the National Assembly does. And they hold you responsible for CDF. And I would like to ask all of you to make sure that you guard this fund jealously. Even when we leave this House, CDF should remain here so that it can act as a gap between the national government and the county government. And Mr. Speaker, finally, I would like to say that I want to congratulate Honorable Duale for his position as leader of majority. I also want to congratulate many of the members of the Jubilee side who have won their seats. I hope we will be having very intelligible and reasonable discussions in this House so that we can change the destiny of our country and make sure that we improve the lives of our people. I hope that we will move in as a people who are intelligent and reasonable about our politics and about our development agenda so that we can then move our country forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, with those very few remarks.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, allow me.
From the member for Yembe North, what's your point of order?
It's on now. Now, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the whole debate and the discourse about the CDF, there is no member, especially those who have been here before, who is keen to mention about the department called the Audit Department in the CDF office. Mr. Speaker, we need to work out a process whereby those details are taken to the Auditor General, or those guys are disbanded and removed from working anywhere in Parliament. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you notice what has been happening is, any member of public who has been complaining about CDF, those fellas, when they show up in the constituency, I will give you an example. Some money was spent, 12 million shillings for transformers in my constituency. Now, when those guys came there to check what's going on, by a member of the public complained, walikuja wakiuliza yetu ni ngapi, kama mlikula 12. So the issue has been the Department of Audit. If there are members who have benefited from it, I may be able to defend them. But it is a very bad department. It is to be disbanded and also investigated.
Member for Nabaholo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, given that Honorable Maora is old enough, I thought maybe there was a strong point of order from his side. Honorable Speaker, allow me to proceed and support the motion as it is, the 22 constituencies and the members, Honorable Speaker,
that, Honorable Speaker, let it be done immediately, not to take some time the way ours, which were cited earlier on, have taken some time before they are gazetted. So I urge the Honorable Speaker, the Leader of Majority, to move with the speed and make sure at least this small number is gazetted as soon as possible. Honorable Speaker, I have been impressed by the manner in which both the Leader of Minority and the members of the other side have responded to this and have exactly showed, Honorable Speaker, one major issue that is affecting our cause, Honorable Speaker. And the issue is we must align ourselves with the 2013 and 2015 NGCDF and the 2013 CDF Act, Honorable Speaker. But I want to get the challenge on the other side, Honorable Speaker, that this can only be done through the Committee on CDF. And once the Committee on CDF is constituted, Honorable Speaker, we are able now to address what is it that is affecting the whole flow of the fund, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, my concern to the two, that is the Chief Whip minority side and Chief Whip of the majority side, let them come up as soon as possible, give us the committees, Honorable Speaker, where we are going to address this issue that is going to affect us. Honorable Speaker, another thing that I have to raise concerning CDF is the ability to disburse the funds. You find that 2016-2017, the disbursement of funds is not complete among all the 290 constituencies. I urge the board, the CDF board, and the Treasury to make sure, Honorable Speaker, they disperse the funds on time. We are late. We are now discussing issues of 2017-2018, yet 2016-2017 funds have not been dispersed. The challenge which you have, Honorable Speaker, is we are going to accumulate the funds from year 1 to year 2, and then the ability to consume the funds is going to be a challenge among various constituencies, Honorable Speaker. I want to urge that the Treasury, together with the board, move with the speed to make sure that they disperse the funds on time. Honorable Speaker, we have the issue which we also need to address through the CDF committee, the issue that touches on the management and administration of the fund. Honorable Speaker, through what the Chief Whip said, that we need to have the issue of the oversight committee. This oversight committee, Honorable Speaker, that's the only place where a member of parliament comes in. So once it's in place, I believe we will now be able to contain and control the funds, although not handling it on day-to-day basis, Honorable Speaker. I feel that is important, and the way one speaker said, Honorable Sonet was the chair, and the entire chair for the 11th Parliament should have seen that problem and handled it for us, Honorable Speaker. We look at the issue that Honorable Speaker, most of the speakers have said, what is it that we are emphasizing on CDF? One might wonder, how come an honorable member might come from a region which is dominated by another region, another political activism, Honorable Speaker? I come from a region where most of the proponents are NASA. But, Honorable Speaker, I managed to come in Jubilee strongly because of my ability to handle the CDF. Had I not handled it well, definitely, Honorable Speaker, I would not see the door of this House for the second time. I want to thank those who supported me. I want to thank my members who were there last time, that this time again, I'll be strong enough to oversight from within so that we are able to catch up with what is supposed to be done for the members, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there are various projects. One speaker said that we are not entitled to participate in, as in county-favored projects, and they would want us to incorporate. I would want to urge my colleagues to respect devolution. We want to respect devolution, that county functions, let them remain county functions. We do national government functions. We will do it better, and we will want to prove that on the comparative scale, Honorable Speaker, what we've been able to achieve with CDF can now be compared to what the county government has been able to achieve on the same scale, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, it's a good comparison to give us chance to show that we are able to work with the little that we have. Therefore, with that, Honorable Speaker, I say I support.
Well, I can see a number of proposed interventions, but before I give a chance, let me recognize pupils from Matiani Salvation Army Primary School from Matungulu constituency, Machakos County, were in the public gallery to observe the proceedings. Member for Alego Usonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And from the outset, I would like to say that I support this motion as outlined. And I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that CDF so far is one of the most impactful devolution items this country has seen. And I think this is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, it has so many enemies. We have the civil society, we have the executive, we have the county governments, most of who are against the administration of CDF. And I think this is the reason why this is happening, Mr. Speaker, is because of serious accolades that CDF projects has continued to receive in comparison to those projects that are being done by our counties across the country. You find that a project that is undertaken by CDF will be more received by Wananchi than those that are being done by our county governments. So I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is upon Parliament to protect CDF by all means, because we have many, many enemies. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that I have seen that the CDF allocations across the constituencies is uniform. And I would like to say this with a lot of humility to my colleagues, who probably represent constituencies that are more smaller than the others. And Mr. Speaker, I find this unfair. For instance, my constituency, Alego Usonga, has 6 wards, 110,000 voters. And if you compare it, for instance, with, say, Garissa Township constituency, which I am told is quite smaller, it is not in order, Mr. Speaker, for this Parliament to continue allocating resources equally across the constituencies, knowing very well that some constituencies are bigger, others are smaller, in terms of geography and also in terms of population. So I would like this.
There's an intervention from the Honorable Gladys Sholei. Just one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise under Standing Order number 95, and in as much as I do agree and do support this motion and agree with the sentiments of my colleagues, I humbly request, since it's your discretion, Mr. Speaker, that we now call the mover to reply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Honorable Member for point noted, the member for Alego Usonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I would like to say that I would like to address the question of delay in gazettement of the already names of that members of the committee that have already been passed in this House. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that, in my view, the delay in gazettement of the members of our committees that have been passed in this House is strategic. It is by design, because, Mr. Speaker, this government is broke. The government is trying to delay the process of effecting CDF so that they can be able to collect resources so that they can use it to give to constituencies. Because, you know, once these names are gazetted, it will be upon the government to move fast with speed and release the funds. And, Mr. Speaker, you know very well that this government spent humongous resources in buying weak and cheap politicians during these campaigns. And a lot of money, a lot of resources were used in this process. And therefore, I would like to say that this government needs to wake up and realize that this CDF issue is very serious, and they must gazette the names as soon as possible so that this country can move on. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much.
Honour members, the Honourable Gladys Sholei stood in her place and claimed that the Speaker to call upon the mover to reply. I must put the question. Those of you who are in the last Parliament, you know, when I have to put the question, you must be either seated or freeze. So you can't come to stand in front of me, including the majority whip. If you could, so that we can dispose of this matter. The point raised by the Honourable Gladys Sholei was that the mover be called upon to reply, called upon me to put the question, that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Move on.
Honorable Speaker, you have heard the lonely voice of Honorable Koyo. He has a very rich history, for those of you who don't know him. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply, and I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that my colleagues, the opposition, are back in the House. And as I listen to them, from Honorable Mbandi to the last speaker, the member for Alego Usonga, they are talking of government, government, government. So they have come to the realization that there is a government. They have also come to the realization that that government is led by a president. And that president is none other than Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. And I want to assure them on behalf of Uhuru Kenyatta and his government that we will treat and devolve resources to counties, to CDF, but make sure when money goes to your constituencies, you don't resist. That as you resist and be in Nairobi, then your constituencies will not receive the relevant. As I said to the Speaker, the Attorney General will tomorrow publish the Gazette notice, and then the Minister for Finance in this government will make sure that as per the instruction of the President, that resources will be given to all devolved system and the national government. But Mr. Speaker, finally, even this afternoon, I have tabled about 15 constituencies whose audited accounts have been done by the Auditor General. I really want to ask colleagues, when you hear your constituency auditor reports have been tabled, go to table room, get a copy, go through, because a time will come when your fund manager, when the CDF board will appear before the Public Accounts Committee or the funds committee for those special funds to answer questions. So it's good you pick a copy, you liaise with your fund manager so that all the necessary documents are availed before the actual appearance before that committee. And it makes your work very tidy. It cleans your constituency. If you are a new member of parliament, you will see what you are previously done in leadership position, and the constitution is respected. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, as members of the Fair Agenda, NASA, ANC is a member of the Fair Agenda. We are just asking you, Mr. Speaker, kindly protect the institution of parliament, protect the standing orders by ensuring that the list that was brought in yesterday is thrown out because it does not merit standing order number 20 of the standing order of this House. Secondly, it totally violates the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, kindly intervene and give us direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Majority, you want to contribute to this? I thought it was... No, Mr. Speaker, we don't want the chamber and your good office and chair to be turned into a family feud. We don't want this House. They have resisted outside. They have demonstrated. Now that we're happy the NASA Brigade are back in the House, the Speaker, they are bringing their resistance within themselves to the chamber. So, Speaker, as you give direction, I don't see the reason where you come in. There is no role for the Speaker here. The Speaker, Honorable Sifula can only be protected by his party leader, who is a core principal within the NASA. And we cannot solve the problem of Musalia Mudavadi in the chamber. Neither are we ready to solve the problem of Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, from their problems with the Baba. Now that a government has been formed and an opposition is taking shape, Mr. Speaker, I really indulge Honorable Sivula to call a parliamentary group meeting of ANC and, in a honest way, reconsider that marriage.
If a marriage is not working, Mr. Speaker, you divorce. Speaker, we don't want to be part of we don't want to be part of a divorce case that in the beginning we were not there. Speaker, we were not part of the marriage, and we were not invited to the ceremony where this marriage was being cemented. And as people who believe in God, Mr. Speaker, if there is a problem among the 4 family members, the best thing is, I think they're all grown up. ANC is a grown up, it has 14 members in the House. Baba has 71 members and they can agree to a formation. If you are not comfortable in the minority, we, the majority, are ready to accommodate you. We are ready. We will give you committee members, come and form a coalition with us. We will even give you a share in government. You might even get a PS or an ambassador or a minister, which you cannot get it there. So Honorable Savula, please take the message to Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. You have willing partners. People who want to build Kenya, who want to bridge communities and regions and tribes, is where Jubilee is. So if they have suffocated you and you are unable to breathe, there is a place where there's plenty of oxygen, where there's plenty of food, where there's a plenty of tolerance. In Jubilee, there's tolerance. In Jubilee, Mr. Speaker, there is accommodation. It's only in Jubilee where a pastoralist like me can lead. It's only in Jubilee where you see the face of a Luya, where you see the face of any community. So run away from ethnic capture. What we see in NASA is ethnic capture. It's ideological capture. So we want to come back. Please, Honorable Speaker, I really want to urge and put my word that the matter you are told to address, Mr. Speaker, is a matter which is outside the role and the function of the Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, you can as well still give unsolicited advice as a leader, as our Speaker. You can give advice to Honorable Sivula on how to survive in the next 5 years under the ethnic capture political party. And I want to thank Honorable Junet and Honorable Mbandi because they earned because of their capacity and because of their hard work and defense of Baba and the coalition. They didn't earn because of nothing else.
Well, I think, you've made references to many formations, marriages, which were consummated somewhere. I don't know whether in a mosque or in a church or in the forest or in Jivaji gardens. All those are places where you can consummate marriages. So I may not want to, since this matter is recurring, having arisen yesterday, I'll give you a considered position of the chair, which is to reflect the traditions that have been there in the past in this House whenever there are these kind of issues. I don't think whether there is need for us to really debate this. We don't need to debate it. I'll just deal with our own traditions and the rules of the House. As you know, the rules themselves are anchored in the Constitution. That's why Article 124 says that each House of Parliament shall be at liberty to promulgate its own rules for its own for guidance of its own proceedings and processes, both in plenary and in committees. So we will be guided accordingly. Unfortunately, I even want to leave the chair because I have, as you know, other functions that I must attend to. Honorable Nikal, you want to deal with that issue again of marriages and. No, but you know that if we don't want to deal with marriages, and then you are talking about even suffocating. Now this is a bit difficult. I'm sure this chamber is very well ventilated. I'm sure you cannot suffocate here. Can I give you 1 minute? 1 minute.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I said that as talked in this House first time today, I'm aware that there is a feeling that perhaps we are starting to work. And I often, and in the past, have not found it very easy to agree with Honorable Duale, but on this one, at the beginning of his statement, I think I want to agree with them that probably it may not be in order to bring this matter for the discussion. But having said such a honorable thing, he went on to actually take full advantage of the situation. There is no member here who is not wise enough or who is intelligent enough to know that as much as you are saying we should not bring it here, you go on to take advantage of a solace where perhaps there is none, and that may be in order politically. But I think, Mr. Speaker, we have to know that as we are sitting here, the state or this nation is not in a tranquility as we probably think, and perhaps there is need to be very cautious when dealing with such issues. Mr. Speaker, we have just come from an election where IBC failed tragically as an independent institution and went through an election that has left the nation so tragically and painfully divided, with the resulting election that has brought an outcome that cannot bring tranquility because a large part of the nation does not believe that the leadership is legitimate, even if it is deemed to be legal.
But does that same population now, because you are now introducing another dimension, Honorable Nyikal, that same election you are talking about brought you here. It is the same one that brought you here.
Yes.
You want me to adjudicate on the issue of
yes,
the
Mr. Speaker, I'm coming to the point where you are. It is therefore important that we deal with institutions, and I agree with you that you will look at all the institutions that are in place. And I will also really call for calm that this matter, I don't think, has left the confines of the coalition, that the coalition is unable to deal with it. I think the coalition is still perfectly able to deal with it. So I partly agree with the Honorable Duale on that small aspect, but I'll put the other aspect and agree with you that we leave this matter probably back to the coalition to deal with it.
Out of your matter. My responsibility after receiving that communication is to read it out to the House. Now, the member is raising it on a point of order, alleging violation of Standing Order number 20. So the best thing is I will look into the matter raised by the Honorable Safula and be able to give a communication. For the time being, not on this, we will move to the next order. Next order. No, Honorable Omenen, we cannot deal with this. Honorable Omenen, what is your point of order now?
My friend, I thank you, Speaker, for this opportunity. Before we start the next motion, I will wish to request my colleagues, members of Parliament who are here. The misuse of Article 95 of the Standing Order, we have to put it aside. Because, Mr. Speaker, there are members of Parliament who are here. They are now 3 months. They have never gotten an opportunity to speak. For there are people waiting to hear them to talk. While there are some members here, including the leader of majority, they have this opportunity. A leader of majority is also a member of Parliament of a specific constituency, just like any other member here. despite being majority. So let us respect members of parliament who have not given that, who have not gotten that opportunity of speaking. If a motion is meant to take 2 hours, let it take 2 hours, so that others can also get that opportunity of speaking, of contributing. This issue of saying, just because you have spoken, you have expressed, and then you don't care about others, it's not in order, Mr. Speaker. And finally, my colleagues, because I've been given an opportunity.
No, don't take advantage of, you just raised that. That's sufficient.
Thank you, Speaker. If resist does not work, assist can work. So if they have requested for assistance, let us assist them because they are in turmoil.
Honorable Omenen, the issue about how we manage time here is very critical, because even if you do your own calculations, when the House sits at 2:30, even if nothing else was to be done in the preliminary stages, no prayers, nothing, up to 7:30, if every member were to speak up to 7 p.m., only for 10 minutes, do the arithmetics, only 27 members will speak. And that's assuming there are no interruptions. Every one of them is speaking for only 10 minutes, and it is 2:30 to 7 p.m. Only 27 members will speak. And therefore, sometimes it becomes necessary, in the interest of the House also, to have a member who has not spoken rise, and that's the practice, rise to claim that everybody speaking is repeating themselves, or there's nobody who is opposing a particular business or motion. In which case, then it's only fair, in the interest of better management of time, that certain debates be curtailed or be brought to an end in order to proceed with all the other businesses that are there. And therefore, while I appreciate that 27 members out of 349 in a day, it's a very small number. So we have to, but of course we are also lucky in the sense that there are those who, like the member who wanted several hours but spoke for less than 5 minutes. We have those of you who speak 2 minutes with those many remarks I support or I oppose, 2-3 minutes. So that's how we are able to also gain time. We are happy that some of you are not able to speak for 10 minutes. You find it too long, which is good for the other member, for the benefit of the other members. And of course, there are others who choose not to speak. Even though the Honorable Omenen may be sympathetic to them, you know that there are some members who did not want to speak, who would come here and walk out. Therefore, you cannot surely, you can't eat your cake and have it, and claim that because you are all the members of the panel do know that sometimes there is need to balance. The way some of you come here, place your cards, you may find that members from one county, they follow each other, 1, 2, 3. Surely it will look unfair that only members from one county are addressing the House. So there is need for us also to have the flexibility to balance, so that when you hear this county, you know this one is this corner of the country, you get somebody else from another county. And then of course, like today has been a very unfortunate day. I think all the ladies came after everybody had placed their requests. And our machine only is able to display the first 10 names. So when I scroll down, you go to number 30, number 40, you see now, you start seeing ladies. So sometimes you must exercise discretion. Do we need to give those who came at 3:30, 3:40, when the others who place their cards at 2:30, 3 p.m. So all these are things that we have to balance. the member for Mwingi Central, I know the time you came in. You know your size is such that I can't miss to see you. So I saw you when you came in. Unfortunately, your count was is not among the first few today, but it is still inside. It's still inside. It's still within the system. So maybe in the next business, you will get a chance to contribute. So don't ever imagine that you are being ignored. It's just that there are several members, like the member for Makueni, you know, every time he comes. Today, you are lucky he is not present today. When he comes here, he's the first one to place his card, and whether he doesn't know which business is to be debated, but he places his card. You've had some members say, even though my card was there, it was not meant to say anything about this one. It's because members want to make sure that their cards are in there and they're able to. That's the only way how to catch the speaker's eye, using the machines. So, but nevertheless, we have to do the balance. We have to do the balance. And I don't know, I'm aware that there are also coalitions. So even within coalitions, now there's the NASA coalition. I know the parties in NASA coalition, I think about four or five. I think the names which were rendered, including some others, is it CCU? CCU, I don't know, Muungano, and some others. But I know the main ones, but even when I see those small ones also, they are also members of parliament. They are entitled, they are in your coalition. You cannot ignore them. When the member for Seme speaks, now I should look for somebody from Kilifi, because I know the member for Seme is from Kisumu County. Yeah? The member sitting next to him, the member for Kandui, once he has spoken, so the other members of Bungoma County might wait for a little longer before they get a chance to speak. We have to do that kind of balancing, because every one of you here represents people and interests. And we must keep balancing that at all times. I think we can proceed with the business appearing as number 10. Leader majority.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Public Trustee Amendment Bill 2017 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the main objective of this bill is to amend the Public Trustee Act, CAP 168, and the reason is to align it with the Constitution of Kenya as a priority. Number two is to enhance good governance, to expand the scope of the functions of the public trustee, and finally to reduce the time taken to administer the estates of the deceased persons. Very, very important, Mr. Speaker. So this public trustee is a very, very important amendment bill, Mr. Speaker. There are many, many Kenyans who go through a lot of difficulties when it comes to the administration of the estates of the deceased persons. So, Mr. Speaker, just on a highlight, I'll go on the highlights of this bill. Clause 3 of this bill proposes to amend the Principal Act by inserting a new subsection 2A. And that subsection 2A just is to introduce the objects of the Act, and this include the establishment of a public trustee investment board for investment purposes. These huge resources within this department must have an element of a trustee investment board for the investment of those resources. Clause 4, Mr. Speaker, repeals section 3 of the Principal Act. And the Principal Act is the one that I have said is that of the Public Trustee Act, CAP 168. So this bill is an amendment to the current Principal Act that is in existence. So clause 4 is repealing section 3 of the Principal Act. And the reason why it's repealing is that it excludes the jurisdiction of the public trustee over property that is owned communally, yet the public trustee should be administering the estate of the deceased person who has an interest in land or assets. So that section we are repealing basically was dealing with more of a community. And we are repealing it so that this law deals with only the deceased person, his interest in land or assets which are owned which are owned communally. Clause 5 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, if members have the bill, and if you don't have, you can get it from the table office, is to amend Section 5 of the Principal Act. And what does it do? It substitutes the word minister with the words the Attorney General, since the Attorney General is the appointing authority for the office of the public trustee. In the Principal Act, currently, the minister is referred to in that law. So we are amending it and interchanging the minister with the Attorney General, because the Attorney General is the one who has been given the powers to appoint, or the appointing authority for the office of the public trustee. Clause 6, Mr. Speaker, is huge of that bill, because Clause 6 proposes to amend the Principal Act by inserting new sections. And these are Section 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, 5E, 5F, as new subsections in Clause 6. And the Act does not have, Mr. Speaker, the provisions for the appointment, the tenure of office, and the functions of the public trustee. So these sections, each one of them is coming with specific roles. Some will deal with appointments, some will deal with the tenure of office, others will deal with the functions of the public trustee. For example, Section 5A, which we're introducing, seeks to cure the gap by providing for the qualification criteria for a trustee as a corporate, as a body corporate entity. If you look at Section 5B we're introducing, it deals with the establishment of the public trustee as a body that can be sued, which has liabilities. Section 5C seeks to provide for the appointment of the criteria of appointment of the public trustee. 5D deals with the appointment of the public trustee as a public guardian of those resources, and that is the guardian for adults who are incapable of making decisions by virtue of either their age or infirmity or any other justifiable reasons which are deemed by a court of law. So, Mr. Speaker, 5G provides for the administration of the payments of compensation under the Work Injury Benefits Act, the Pension Act, the Civil Servants Group Accident Insurance Scheme, or any other payments as a result of an accident, the administration of any trust. Mr. Speaker, Clause 14 of the bill enhances the functions and the duties of a public trustee. Clause 15 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with an amendment to Section 21 of the Principal Act in order to redefine the description of persons who are of unsound mind or who are lunatics and who must be paid. So you see, this bill is dealing with even Kenyans who fall within this public trustee and who cannot make a decision because maybe they have unsound mind or they are lunatics. So the law even protects that category of Kenyans. That's why this amendment to this bill to this Principal Act is important, and I really want to thank the Jubilee government or the government of Kenya for seeing it wise to bring this bill as a government. It has passed through the cabinet. Clause 16 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, proposes to amend Section 25 of the Principal Act, and this is to empower the public trustee to compel the production of documents. There are situations where people don't want to cooperate. There are situations where in fulfilling his functions, certain institutions or individuals don't want to give documents for him to administer those resources. So there's a law, section 16, it's amending section 25, and it gives him powers to compel, of course, within also the Constitution, Article 35, access to information. Clause 18 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, proposes to amend the Principal Act by inserting 2 new subsections immediately after section 27, and these are as follows. Section 28, which is being inserted, will deal with applications of unclaimed assets from applying to the public trustee, and section 29 will deal with empowers the public trustee to apply alternative dispute resolution mechanism in dealing with compliance with the Constitution. So, Mr. Speaker, number one, principally, we are bringing this amendment, or government brings this amendment to deal with harmonization of this old law with the current constitutional dispensation, and of 2, to create good and enhanced good governance structure on how this public trustee should be run. 3, it has a function to expand the scope of the functions of the public trustee. And finally, it reduces the time taken to administer the estates of the deceased. So, Mr. Speaker, it's as clear as it is from the day, and I'm sure if, when looking at this bill, if members will go into. And Mr. Speaker, just for an advice to my colleagues and new members, it's good that when you see such a bill in the order paper, unless it's a new bill, if it is a bill that is amending a principal act that is in existence, it's good that you go to table office. As you get the bill, you get also that principal act that is dealing with, so that you compare where it's amending, where it's deleting, where it's repealing. It's easier for one to understand. And I'm sure when we come to the committee of the whole house, this is a proposition from government. So if you can enrich this bill as a member of parliament, we will be very, very happy, both in terms of the debate and the second reading. But when it comes to the committee of the whole house, we will expect members to bring their own amendments on making sure that this law is perfected, becomes better than the drafters, which is government. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and ask the great member of Tharaka constituency to second.
Member for Tharaka. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to second this bill, which essentially is a bill to amend the Public Trustee Act, Cap 168 of the laws of Kenya. The act deals with the trusts where there is no personal representative to act for a person. We have to find an officer of the government to represent that person. And that person of the government is in the name of a corporate body known as the public trustee. I remember during my days in the university law school, we used to hate trusts, the law on trusts. We learned about the public trustee. I never thought I would ever find it anywhere in life, and therefore we never paid much attention. It is important, members of parliament, we actually understand what this law is all about, because it tries to solve one of the problems you will face in your constituency. The first thing you're going to face is somebody telling you to take him to the public trustee. And if you do not know who the public trustee is, you may actually not help that person. Therefore, it is important to know that there is such an office which acts for Kenyans who have assets in the public sector or who have assets in the private sector, but they do not have any persons to represent them when they pass away. The majority leader has explained on the sections that are to be amended. It is important to lay emphasis on the fact that there is going to be an investment body for the monies that are collected by the public trustee. That way, the fear of the money getting lost is allayed. But there are many instances when the office of the public trustee has money that is not claimed. And this is why the Act makes it very specific that the provisions of the Unclaimed Assets Act do not apply here. Because unclaimed assets, that law governs what is in banks and financial institutions. In this particular instance, what happens to money that is in the coffers of the public trustee and that money is actually not claimed? It will be invested for the given period of time. After that, the money goes back to the consolidated fund and it is appropriated. What we used to call it a sheet to the government. The government appropriates the money and the money possibly will be part of the CDF that we are going to get. Very important also to note that the qualifications of persons to sit in that investment board is really professional qualification. It is not going to be people who cannot handle trustee money. It is people who are supposed to be taking care of public money like any other public officer. This act, or the act being amended, is an old colonial law. Those acts that were passed during the colonial times, and as it is today, I do not think that the founders of our nation had a lot of interest in what was going on then, because they could hardly understand it. I hope today we may actually be able to deal with such an act in a better manner than it was that particular time. What happened then is that the office of the public trustee was created under the Minister for Justice and the Constitutional Affairs. That is why even today, the old act makes reference to a minister. But after promulgating the new constitution in 2010, those titles ceased to be, and the office of the public trustee, as it has always been, falls under the office of the Honorable Attorney General. This is why we are saying any reference to the minister should actually be deleted, and we make reference to the Honorable Attorney General. Finally, when honorable members, you are requested to assist anyone with a problem with a public trustee, that office is to be found at Sharia House. That is where you go, you will be guided accordingly, and possibly your constituents will actually be satisfied. And finally, tied to this act, which is chapter 168 of the laws of Kenya, is chapter 160, the Law of Succession Act. And that is the law that governs the problems we are faced with in the constituency, including my own constituency of Tharaka, where hundreds and hundreds of people, especially widows, they are waiting for you to assist them to get letters of administration because their husbands have died, they are the pieces of land, and they cannot deal with that land until they get letters of administration. My plea to this honorable house is that once the Committee for Justice and Legal Affairs is established, we must move with speed to find a solution to how folks, citizens in the rural areas who are widows left by deceased husbands, how we can assist them promptly, expeditiously. They do get the letters of administration to enable them deal with the estates of their deceased husbands. In most cases under African systems, it is the men who actually have title to property. It is husbands who are working, it is husbands who have title deeds, and when they die, these poor people, these poor ladies, these poor widows are left with no avenue of getting assistance, especially when you recommend them to go to advocates, where a poor lady is going to be charged 100,000, 150,000 to protect an estate whose value is not more than 100,000. In essence, it means this lady goes and borrows 100,000 to pay a lawyer 100,000, and once she gets the letters of administration to sell the piece of land, pay back the debt, and the lady becomes destitute. So it is my humble prayer to that committee that we look at the Law of Succession Act in such a way that we amend it to make it exceedingly easy for anybody, especially a widow who has lost a husband, to go to court, get those letters at minimum costs with great speed so that their lives can go back to normal in spite of having lost the husband. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that we do support the amendment to this old law. We must bring it in consonance to second. Sorry, I do second that this amendment is effected. We bring the law in line with the Constitution, and eventually the act itself is in consonance with modern day lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to second.
Very well, honorable members, I propose a question, which is that the Public Trustee Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 32 of 2017 be read a second time. Honorable Kiaige Diaka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to support the motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, I once worked as a public trustee in the Department of Public Trustee at the Attorney General's office, and I know the importance of the amendments that have been fronted in this House today. It is very important, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we align the Act to the changing legal dynamics, in the sense that the Act in question was conceived way back before independence, and the environment is really changing, meaning that the Act has been left behind. We need to bring it at par with the changing legal dynamics. When I look at the intended amendments, you realize that it expands the nature of the trustees to include even body corporates. There before, only human beings could handle this. The inclusion of a body corporate means we are expanding the scope. We are making sure that even body corporates can also handle this. And these body corporates are capable of being sued or sue on behalf of the deceased estate. Also, I've seen that the amendments intend also to capture the missing persons. What are we talking about? We are saying if a person has been missing for so long and his whereabouts is not known, then we can include his property. It can be included under the public trustee to ensure that the beneficiaries of his estate don't suffer because of this missing person. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would also want to note that the intended amendments wants to make sure that the time dimension is also captured. When I was a public trustee, cases could go on forever, on and on and on, and the beneficiaries would suffer in poverty because the cases were never ending on time. The timetable given upon which property will be distributed ensures that the beneficiaries enjoy the property of the deceased. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, I also want to note that there before, the Act never captured the inclusion of people of unsound mind. Much as the intention of the old Act was to handle the property of a deceased person, it has expanded that to include people of unsound mind, people who are not capable of handling their own affairs. The public trustee comes in to handle their property to ensure that also their beneficiaries are not swindled their property by other people, and it ensures that the property also vests very fast to the intended beneficiaries. With those few remarks, I support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mwadime Adru, member for Mwatate.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support these amendments, though I have not gone in details in reading the amendments themselves, but over a time I've been thinking about it because this act was done long time ago during colonial time. It's good to align the law according to our constitution, which we are using it right now. Mr. Speaker, me as a member of Parliament of Mwatate, I've had several cases related to public trustee and trying to enhance, as the way Majority Leader was putting it, to enhance this department. It goes very well to the unfortunate Kenyans so that they can get whatever what it is theirs in good time. Mr. Speaker, since this parliament started, some of us have been settling here and there. We've never had opportunity to talk. It's also, for me, good to say thank you to the Mwatate people of Taita Taveta County for re-electing me as a second-time member of parliament, showing that at least these trusts, what I did, they believe it was good for them. That's why they managed to re-elect me again. Mr. Speaker, public trustee is across the country, and I'm sure there are many cases, and there are some very unfortunate, even they don't know where to go. And I'm sure once these amendments are done, the public relations department related to this should go to the entire country and talk about it so that all Kenyans can be able to know the existence of this department, and timelines should be clear so that for the less unfortunate ones can be knowing exactly time which they can be getting their properties. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I didn't read this act, but I'm going to go about it and see whether I can do some amendments if at all they'll be required. So I don't talk much, but thanks a lot for recognizing. Thanks a lot, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Shamala Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support the amendments to the Public Trustee Bill of 2017. I do wish to make the following observations. I have noted that in clause 17, the Principal Act is amended by inserting the following new sections: that the Unclaimed Financial Assets Act shall not apply to the public trustee. I wish to propose, Mr. Speaker, sir, that when this bill shall go to the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs, that there be a mutual cooperation between the public trustee and the body that deals with the Unclaimed Financial Assets Act. This is important, Mr. Speaker, sir, because it is important to identify if for any reason some of the assets that were to be managed under the Public Trustee Act may be in the unclaimed, with the body that deals with unclaimed financial assets.
Very well. Honorable Mutemi, member for Mwingi Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion. But before I do so, Mr. Speaker, because I love life, and I feel hurt when we lose lives. Allow me to take this opportunity to send a message of condolences to the families who have lost their lives during the electioneering period, especially during the demonstrations of NASA, because we must also look like we appreciate life, irrespective of which part of the political divide we come from. And maybe urge the government to sometimes be humane to life and uphold the Constitution. When people go to demonstrate, every person, even those who have not gone to school, they know that the Constitution allows them the right to assemble freely and to demonstrate freely. And therefore, I urge the government to just respect that, so that the government can also be respected by all the Kenyans. I thought, Mr. Speaker, I needed to say that before I come back to the motion. And this motion is very important to Kenyans, this bill, because we keep on losing lives every day, and properties are left with nobody to look after them. And therefore, I want to support this motion, especially clause 16. Clause 16, which compels the trustee to produce any document that you go for, and you can be given without a lot of hassle. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, allow me to also comment those who are amending this bill, because it is now making it very easy for people to administer properties of those who are deceased. Even I came across this problem when I had bought land personally from somebody, and even before the transactions were finished, the person who was selling the land to me passed on. And you find yourself in a lot of problems because you have already paid some money, you don't know what to do next. And I feel this bill is now coming at the right time so that it can save some of those situations, difficult situations, and make it easy to administer land. I also want to say the separation of public land, public properties from private properties makes it very easy, so that when you are dealing with private property, you know where to go, which act to look at, which clauses to look at, and when you are dealing with the public land, it is very easy. I can see this bill has separated that to make it very easy. And the timings also, the timings of how to execute all this has been made easy. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this motion. Thank you.
Honorable Ridikiri, member for Bure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like to support this motion, this bill, as it is, of course, with the few amendments that many members have spoken about. Mr. Speaker, the commitment of Jubilee government, despite the fact that our opponents haven't realized there's a government in power, is to make things easier for the citizens of this country to enjoy the benefits of good governance. And this motion, or this bill, which is before us, caters for both the disadvantaged, the low income, their income, and put them in a level where they are able to manage their business and their lives even when they pass on, because they are guaranteed that whatever they leave behind, those they have left behind are going to enjoy what they have left behind without having a lot of legal issues and expenses. Mr. Speaker, I have been a victim of what the honourable member has just spoken, and I'm still going through the same issue. If this bill was in force, it would have been easier for me to get through to solve that problem. Mr. Speaker, we have so many people in my rural area, the constituency that I represent, very poor families with very small opportunities for them. When they pass on, their rad is scrambled by unscrupulous people in the society, or even some institutions. So when we have a public trustee in place, it means even this small person in the village are protected, and the transactions can go smoothly. Many citizens have fallen victims of very rich people. Many citizens, either land or even the money they have in the bank, or even their small business they are running. But where we have a public trustee, immediately something like this happens and these people are registered with the public trustee, there is a place where the citizens will go and have their cases handled properly. Mr. Speaker, we cannot sit back and not pass this bill. I personally thank the drafters, those people proposed, my very good friend from the latter who seconded it, and I want to be very keen on what he's saying, and we totally agree. This is one bill that is going to cater for our people at the constituency. Personally, I am sure my constituents are going to benefit from this, because I came here in order to protect the interest of everybody calling himself member of Bole community. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this and say that Jubilee government fears and recognizes God as the sovereign giver of life. So, inasmuch as my honourable member from the opposition says we are sensitive also at Jubilee of people who have died, what we need to look at and ask ourselves, why did these people die? Who facilitated their death? Who did it? How did the kid in the balcony was killed without any police on site? There are so many questions that remains to be answered by those who are handling demonstrations, giving opportunities for gowns to do what they have done. And then we come to Parliament and say, we are so faithful, we have seen people die. Jubilee government stands to respect the life of everybody and it never give an opportunity for anybody to die. Our opponents have more explanations to give as to what, as to why a small boy on the balcony is shot by people who are not police. So let's be sensitive to all of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this bill.
Well, let's have your neighbor, Honorable Huru, for order. Is he or not? I hope I got the name correctly.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the amendment to this act, a very old act. Actually, when I got the proposed amendment from the table room, I made a point of referring to the old act, which is reported to have commenced on 29th of May 1925. So what we are amending is a colonial law which for one reason or another, our successive independent government probably didn't care to look at what probably is not good and therefore needed to be repealed by various houses which were there before the 12th Parliament. Now, there are various provisions of the amendments, proposed amendments, which I want to speak to. The old act, the principal act, for example, talked about minister appointing any fit and proper person as a public trustee. And of course, when it is that vague, anybody can be appointed. And therefore, what is proposed under the new insertion in form of 5A makes the qualification for whoever should be appointed as a public trustee to be very clear. It has to be somebody with 15 years of experience and some legal background and so on and so forth. And I think in the hands of such a person, those funds which are meant for people who are not able to manage what is left behind by either people who died without leaving behind a will, or people who have just gone missing, as it is very common these days, will be safe. And also, another very important aspect of this amendment, which has really impressed me, is provision for Public Trustee Investment Board. It's not just a matter of managing what is there, but also ensure it creates provision for that board to invest in viable business enterprises and grow the fund for the benefit of the beneficiaries which are stipulated in the Act. And for me, and especially the constituency I represent, and many others, we have people who are missing, who go missing these days. And we are defeated as to what we should do with the wealth that they leave behind, especially from the time we started having this issue of terrorism and some people being picked and they go missing. We have so many families which are suffering. The properties which are left behind, the old law does not provide for how the estate should be administered. And I'm glad that the government has noted this and has made provision for missing persons and the properties that they leave behind to be administered by public trustee. Another very interesting aspect of the proposed amendment is actually the terms revising or replacing the terms which were used in the old act. Terms like lunatic, I think in this age, should not be used to refer to any human being. We need to be sensitive to people who have who are mentally challenged. So I also appreciate that part, and I stand to actually support these amendments. Thank you very much.
Well, let's have now Honorable Mawade Musiri, member for Embakasi South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the amendments. This being my maiden speech, I will request for a little bit of indulgence and also another point and fact that I'll share with you. First, I want to thank the people of Embakasi South for having elected me and having faith in me, and or faith and confidence in me. I intend to, and I will make sure that I serve them these 5 years very diligently. Today probably is not, I don't stand here with a smiling face because The young boy that you're referring to, who was murdered on Tuesday, actually happens to come from my constituency in a place, in a ward called, a Pipeline ward. The young boy, no matter how we might want to trivialize it, was innocently playing at the balcony together with the two other boys, and they were shot. A bullet went in through one side of the head and came out through the other side of the head. A young boy by the name Geoffrey Mutinda. And when the bullet came out through the other side of the head, it hit and lodged in the thigh of a pregnant lady who was bending, washing her clothes. That's the point of brutality that we've gotten to as a country. We need to do something to correct the situation. I don't think anybody has a license or authority to just go around and firing bullets at will, no matter who. Because I don't think that boy, innocent as he was, had done anything, young as he was, had done anything to warrant what befell of him. Both parents are unemployed. Now they don't know left from right. Scuffles ensued. After that, between obviously the officers, because they saw who did it, only that they were on a motorbike and they took off. And so when the officers attempted to come and, obviously recover the body, the crowd was still angry and agitated. We managed to actually get the boy out of that place with the assistance of one very able OCPD of Embakasi, Brother Mangira, and at about 4:40 a.m., I think we need to do something drastically and very, very soon. Otherwise, we are drifting in the wrong direction as a country. Embakasi South is made up of, among other places, and I'll specifically talk about just especially two or three areas, is made up of a Pipeline ward, Imara ward, Mukuru kwa Ruben ward, Mukuru kwa Njenga ward, and Kware ward. Mr. Speaker, we talk about equalization fund or needing to get people to the same level. Embakasi South is a constituency in the city of Nairobi, but it is worse off than the other constituencies in the rural area, or the so-called marginalized area. Embakasi South has only one high school with more than 300,000 residents, 151 registered voters. Embakasi South has only one government high school. Embakasi South, and that is Embakasi Girls only. Embakasi South has only one county primary school, and that is Mukuru kwa Njenga Primary. I don't know when we talk about, don't know what transpired in the last 5 years, but I don't know when we talk about being marginalized and set aside, or left behind. Something needs to be done about this so-called equalization fund also, so that some of the constituencies that are so far left behind development-wise or ignored, something can be done about them. Embakasi South has only one road that is tarmac, Catherine Dereba Road alone. Everywhere else, it's nothing but muddy roads, Mr. Speaker. We have a road that is now called, we know it's named Matopeni Superhighway. When, during the campaign, to demonstrate the worst kind of, how bad the situation was, one of my campaigners, as we were attempting to cross the road from one side to the other one, stepped inside and told me, please, sir, wait, let's see how deep it is. When he stepped inside, in gumboot, obviously I was a gumboot, When he stepped inside, his gumboot, the water, the mud actually went into his gumboot. And as he was pulling his leg, the gumboot was left there because he was stuck. So when we talk about marginalized or ignored constituencies, there are some here that needs to be handled. And yes, I promise to work as hard as I can to be able to do what needs to be done, but there's need to really increase, because we had a county government in the last 5 years, last 4.5 years, and not a single road was done by the county government. So as you talk about also the issues, things like the CDF and the such, we might want to consider, I might want to echo what one of my colleagues has said here earlier on about potentially increasing. Because when they go, when your constituency see you, they see the government. Anything that is wrong, it is the Mheshimiwa, that is the MP, that is supposed to fix. When it rains, the people of Kware, because it's on the lower end of, by the river bend, Mr. Speaker, their houses are waterlogged. We don't have any toilets in Mukuru, Kwanjenga. In the entire world, I think we only have 2 toilets in Mukuru, Kwaruben. And talk about trying to prevent cholera and the such. How can we do it? We force our people to go into the restroom, sometimes mostly at night, behind their houses. This is in the city of Nairobi, supposedly the city in the sun. Mr. Speaker, as we discuss and talk about how to improve and work on the amendments on the trustee bill, there are many other things that we need to work on. Mr. Speaker, one other thorny issue that was mentioned earlier on, the Speaker needs to look into the issue, as it was alluded to, of the sharing and the list that was forwarded to him from this side of the aisle on the leadership of the House. There being 4 partners, there is need for something to be done so that everybody feels represented. Everybody was elected here by a good portion or the majority or a good number of his constituents. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the time and I support the amendments. I did not mention my name since I'm green still. My name is Mawathe, Musili Mawathe, Embakasi South constituency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, very well. That was the honourable member's maiden speech, and he couldn't be interrupted. But on the issue that you mentioned about the positions within us, I think the Speaker did mention that he's going to give guidance from the chair. So I think we'll leave that at that. Honourable Mutunga Kanyuithia, member for Tigania West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this amendment. Mr. Speaker, I find the amendment quite in order in terms of its content and context. Mr. Speaker, there are certain provisions that I may need to specifically mention within the amendment itself that may need probably the scrutiny of the House. I'm looking at the composition or establishment of the investment board, which is a good idea. It's going to have the investment board for purposes of managing public funds and public investments. Mr. Speaker, but it is better that we fully separate the management of the assets themselves from the body doing the business, from the body doing the investment of the assets heirs, the people who own the assets. If we are able to separate that, I think we will have clear delineation of responsibilities, and that will be useful. So this separation ensures lack of, rather, removal of biases in the execution of the mandates. Because if there is no clear separation, then the mandate will be cumbersome. There will not be, the desired or due clarity in terms of execution of mandate. In terms of all the other insertions and deletions, or rather the repeals and the amendments that are proposed within this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, I do support.
Yes, let's have Honorable Oyula Maelo, member for Butula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to give my comments on the amendments to Public Trustee Bill. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans have suffered for a long time, basing their claims and so forth on the old acts, which, as we have been told, has been on since 1925. Mr. Speaker, this act left a lot of things hanging for the Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend, I want to thank those who have...
I raised it during the committee stage is that if this fund will be put to a single trust fund, that's a wonderful idea if it is not in the bill. The other issue, which I will support my colleague who was talking about just a few minutes ago, is to separate the investment body and the trusting of the heirs. Should be different bodies. And lastly, this unclaimed money should first be advertised, because the beneficiaries might be there and nobody knows even that there is unclaimed money somewhere. So I would suggest that it's also advertised maybe in the local dailies or local vernacular stations. I beg to support the amendment. Thank you.
Honorable Iringo Kubai, member for Igembe Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this amendment bill on the Public Trustee Bill 2017. Mr. Speaker, this bill is, the original bill is quite old. It was enacted in the colonial days, and to some degree it had become almost outdated. And again, some of the laws or clauses which had been put there were punitive, others were difficult to achieve, and that is why we have ended up with having so many problems in the public trustee offices, and especially administration of the estates of the deceased Kenyans, whose beloved ones who are left to survive them struggle day in, day out, and some of them also pass on before they get to reach or to use or to benefit from the estates left by their loved ones, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you go to our land registries, you'll find that they are littered with many title deeds which belong to deceased persons. And the survivors of these deceased persons, most of them who are ladies, they are old widows, who are maybe illiterate, who are not informed, and they cannot access those title deeds because they don't have letters of administration, they don't have letters of grant or instruments to make them heirs of those properties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you go to our banks, me having been a banker for some years, Mr. Speaker, you will find that there are so many, there's a lot of money lying in the, what they call unclaimed balances or dormant accounts in the banks, because the sons or brothers or sisters or wives or husbands of the deceased cannot access them, Mr. Speaker. And this has become, because this has been there because the process of transferring property of a deceased person to the inheritance of the heirs is so cumbersome and clumsy in this country, Mr. Speaker. And therefore you find that some people are despairing not to go for this money and start looking for other ways of livelihood, knowing very well that there's some money which is lying somewhere in the bank, or there's a property here which cannot be mortgaged to, even to build the family out of an illness or any other calamity, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill because it is removing most of these hurdles, these bottlenecks, and at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, even that money which is in these banks will be collected together and put in a consolidated account where this money can be invested, and once the bona fide owners of this money come in, at least they can receive the original amount, or the amount which was deposited, plus the interest which it has been gained, because the deposit will have been already been invested somewhere to generate some funds for the beneficiaries. Mr. Speaker, the title deeds in this act, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Committee of the Whole House, I intend to bring an amendment, Mr. Speaker, whereby we can give the timeline and the value of the properties involved, especially for deceased persons. If a certain period has expired and the succession has not been done, and maybe the property which is in question is valued less than even the fee which one is supposed to pay, like my brother, Honorable MP for Daraka said, that for you to get inheritance of a piece of land in Meru, which is 1 acre, might be only 200,000. And then the lawyer will ask for 200,000. Then why do you go for it? You better leave it. So, Mr. Speaker, we need a clause whereby the government should subsidize this one. We have got thousands and thousands of widows who require their title deeds. They are lying in registries. In Maua, for example, we have thousands of them, and they have got a list of more than 3,000 ladies who are widowed, and they don't have ways of accessing these title deeds. We should get a way of having a fund which can have a succession cost done for all these people in bulk and vetted by the Attorney General, and then these people can be given their title deeds. Mr. Speaker, I even went all the way to see the Minister of Lands on this similar issue regarding these widows, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy this bill is coming here now, because it is opening a window where we can be able to try and follow that particular issue further for the benefit of these widows, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we talk of succession, it's a very painful issue, Mr. Speaker, because most bread earners, they are the ones who die. And once they die, instead of the people benefiting from the dependents benefiting from their sweat, they end up suffering to get this money, Mr. Speaker. And given that the limitations of the amount which should be administered has been already spelled out in the bill, Mr. Speaker, they should be devolved into our counties, so that we don't keep on trekking from all the way across the corners of Kenya coming to Nairobi to follow a case. Parent who had saved 200,000, and you come to Nairobi maybe that at times, coming all the way from Meru or Mandera or Mombasa or Kilifi or elsewhere, you find that you have used all that money in the process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill is timely. It's bringing down the draconian laws of the Wazungus. Let us move with the current timelines, and I pray and hope that once we make these amendments, the government will move steadily to solve these problems, to remove all these title deeds in our registries, and to get that money which is owned in banks and other places to their rightful owners, or invested correctly for the future benefit of their original heirs. I support, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Koi Waruke, member for Silisia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for also giving me a chance to contribute on this amendment to the trustee bill. Mr. Speaker, many speakers, my colleagues, have talked about the same. And Mr. Speaker, this country is governed by laws. It is governed by the Constitution and the rules, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is the highest time now, Mr. Speaker, for us as a country, as Parliament, to come in to save our people, Mr. Speaker, because it is long overdue. Many people have died before getting their rights, before getting their dues, and even the trustees who are put there, Mr. Speaker, they also live long, follow the process, and finally die. Mr. Speaker, as Parliament, first I think we need to come in fully, because I think we have ignored this, or maybe we were not interested. But it's the highest time, Mr. Speaker, for us to follow, because it is for our people in this country, Mr. Speaker. Why am I saying this, Mr. Speaker? We have the Ministry for Labor that deals with this. And it is only that because of with the constitution change, that maybe affect this bill, Mr. Speaker. It is now time for us to call the Minister for Labor, usually earlier on, before the new constitution. I think ministers used to appear before the floor of the House on a question like this, so that they answer why they always delay to pay this money to the owners. But still the ministry is not dead, the ministry is there. And even this, we can call the minister concerned through the Labor Committee to come and tell us how they will hurry to pay people. And also people coming from far, from Bungoma, all the way to chase their money from Nairobi. And the country is the same. There are offices, labor offices everywhere in this country, Mr. Speaker. So we need to, to come up with the laws, with summon, and then these people, I think, Mr. Speaker, they will hurry up or move quickly to pay the trustees before they die. Because it is of no help, Mr. Speaker, if your money is somewhere and you chase for 20 years, like what the Mheshimiwa said here. You die before get it. Somebody else, maybe your granddaughter or son follows, nothing. So this money, even in the banks, it is a lot of, so many billions that are being held in banks that are not going to the families or the trustees of those people who left their money there, Mr. Speaker. But I support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Should we have now Honorable Tonui Kiprotich, member for Bomet Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also make my contribution on this very, very important amendment bill. As I move back to my second term in this House, maybe I should take a minute to thank the great people of Bomet Central for returning me back to this House to serve them again, and they did that overwhelmingly with their votes, giving me about 86% of it. So I'm very grateful. I believe they appreciated the work which I did here and which I did on the ground for them to give me 86% of their votes. I respect those votes, and I will ensure that I serve them both within this House and back home on the ground, as to ensure that various services are made available as we perform in the area of development. Those as we will do. Back to this bill, I want to support this bill because it's a very, very important bill, because we need to ensure that the funds of those who may be deceased, those who may be missing for a very long time, are transferred to their families or their beneficiaries so that they don't suffer. So addressing the many, many gaps which are there in the current bill on public trustee is very important so that everything becomes smooth and everything can be handled well. I currently, the offices of public trustees are only in Nairobi and former provincial headquarters. This now needs to be devolved to the county level, owing to the current realities that we are now of the county governments, which are closer to the people at the ground. We need also these offices of the public trustees to be there so that there is lots of convenience for our people to be served at the nearest point possible.
I'm happy that in this bill, the issue of investment of those funds which remain idle in the offices of public trustees have been provided for, that they need to be invested so that as the beneficiaries become available, they don't simply get the original amount of funds. They need to get with something on top of it. So this idea of capturing investment in this bill is a positive move, and it needs to be supported by all so that losses are minimized for the beneficiaries. The issue of the people who are to be appointed the public trustees, that they need to have a legal background. I believe this is very, very important because this has lots of legal dimension. I believe they should be even that additional, that they should not simply be having a legal background, they should also be people of integrity, people who are having a practicing license from Law Society of Kenya and any other relevant bodies for them to perform in these offices. They need to be cleared on issues of integrity, issues of legal, whatever the legal requirements. I'm happy that this bill does address the issues of the issue of missing persons. We have had several people who have been missing for very many years. I know of one who was missing for more than 10 years, but the family could not get access to his properties, to his pension or gratuity and the like, and they suffered for more than 10 years before it was discovered that he was already deceased. Now that this is captured, that after 6 years, the missing person could be declared as such missing, and the properties can now be transferred to the beneficiaries, to the members of the family, so that they do not suffer that much. At least we need to minimize. I'm happy that one is captured in this bill. On the issue of the board membership, I'm happy that the board members are not going to overstay in serving, because if you have people overstaying, I believe they will need to learn, they will learn lots about the system, and we will have issues of looting of funds, issues of integrity arising. So appointing them for 3 years, and if they have really performed, it can be renewed. I believe that is acceptable. They should never, never overstay as board members of this trustee board. And the issue of also staggering the appointment of board members is a welcome part of this bill, so that there is no vacuum in the board at any given time. There is also the issue, the institutional memory can also be there when you have some people continuing to serve as others exit from the boards. On the issue of board, the allowances of the boards, in this bill is provided for that the HE will be deciding on the allowances. I believe this needs to be improved and ensure that the Salaries Enumeration Commission is also involved, that it needs to be approving whatever the HE has decided upon, so that we have harmonized allowances in various institutions in government. Because if there is no harmonization of these allowances, then I believe that will be unfair. We need to have it being harmonized, and that can only be harmonized if Salaries Enumeration Commission is involved. The public trustee will be receiving funds to administer from various sources, the pensions and such. I believe pension department needs to pull up its socks so that it can forward those funds to the public trustee to administer. There is too much delay currently in the pensions department. It can even take as long as 5 years for some families to receive, to get their pensions or to get their money to be transferred to the public trustee. This needs to be improved so that the beneficiaries can get their money faster. With those few remarks, I wish to support this bill.
Honorable Wabirianga Najala, member for Bungoma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to speak in this House and more so to give my maiden speech. I have patiently waited and finally, at least, I've caught your eye. Thank you.
Yes, proceed.
I first want to begin by, before I support the bill, I want to begin by thanking the people of Bungoma for unanimously giving me this opportunity to serve as the woman representative and voting for me. I don't take that for granted, and I know I will do my best when it comes to delivering and service to them. I wish to support this motion on the public trustee bill. And it's not just a motion, I think it's an amendment to the bill that has been there for some time and has been in existence for over decades of time. I also wish to comment on the introduction of the investment body, which is going to improve on the fund, not just to remain raw as it is. At least it will get value by the time it gets to the person or the beneficiaries. It would have made some strides and gotten some value. Equal rights to all with such a bill in place will be acceptable, and as Parliament, we believe that this is going to go down into the history by just assisting all people equally. And finally, I want to join the rest of the Kenyans in sending my messages of pole to those who lost their lives during this electioneering period, especially during these times of demonstrations, where we had a couple of people losing their lives, including a small boy whom a member has just been here talking about. It is very sad indeed that our country has to go through that. And at this point in time, the country is still hurting, but we believe that there's going to be dialogue and people are going to heal. Those from the government side and those even from the NASA side should get an opportunity to reconcile. And in the wake of moving forward, we need development. Back where we are elected from, everybody's looking at unto us to deliver and not just to engage in the hula baloos that we keep engaging in. On this, with these few remarks, I wish to support this bill. Thank you.
Very well. Shall we have Honorable Abuol, member for Rongo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to support this bill. And this being my maiden speech, I would first of all like to thank the people of Rongo constituency who overwhelmingly voted me into office because of the trust they had in me. When I was doing my campaigns during the electioneering period, I had the opportunity to campaign and go throughout the constituency. I had the opportunity to see the challenges my people have. I had the opportunity to see the kind of livelihoods that they're leading and the problems they're having. And as I pledged during my campaign period, I would like to give undertaking again to my constituents that I live to my pledges and I'll ensure that during my 5 years period, I'll ensure that I contribute to improving their livelihoods and their welfare. Coming back to the bill, I would like to say that I support the bill, more specifically because the bill tends to reduce the time taken to administer the estate of the deceased. I've seen cases where widows and orphans suffer, not because they don't have property or money that can see them through, but just because they don't know where that money is and they don't have somebody who can administer that property on their behalf so they can get out of the problems. I'd also like to support the bill also because of the amendment of section 25, which will compel the production of documents from his beneficiaries. So I am happy about that amendment in section 25 that will compel production of documents to assist in the administration of the estate. I'm also happy about the insertion of section 29 that will give an opportunity for alternative dispute resolution. Alternative dispute resolution on matters like this, personally I've had experience on matters that are in court. And some of these matters, we've had them referred back to arbitration. Arbitration is cheaper, faster, convenient, and very easy for people to understand, even laymen like us. So this is a very good amendment to the bill, which has been there. This bill has been there from 1925. So I believe that once this bill goes through, it will really assist the widows and orphans in this country. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you very much.
Very well. Honorable members, from the screen here, the 4 members who are still in the queue have spoken and cannot speak twice on this specific one. I guess they are also registering interest to speak in the next business, which is fair enough. And for that reason, I shall call the mover to reply. Honorable Washiri.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the mover is my boss, the majority leader, and given that I'm his whip, I have the obligation of replying by, first of all, noting the comments that members have made here. I'm sure these comments will be very useful when we come to the third reading stage, so that we improve this amendment bill to suit the intended purpose. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, given the time, I would wish to reply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, honorable members, I will putting the question to subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 11, the Copyright Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 33 of 2017, second reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Copyright Act of 2001.
Yes, Honorable Washiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the Copyright Amendment Bill 2017, which seeks to amend the Copyright Act of 2001. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to amend the Copyright Act of 2001 to align the provisions of the Act with the Constitution, to domesticate the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works of persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled, to provide for the liability of internet service providers in cases of online piracy, and to enhance oversight over the collective administration of copyright. Mr. Speaker, sir, Article 40, Item 5 of the Constitution obliges the state to support, promote, and protect the intellectual property rights of the people of Kenya, while Article 69, 1C and 1E mandates the state to protect and enhance the intellectual property of communities. Moreover, Article 11 empowers the state to promote all forms of national and cultural expressions through literature. It also protects through arts, communication, information, mass media, publication, libraries, and other cultural heritage, infringement, piracy, counterfeiting, and mismanagement of rights. This bill intends to address these challenges being faced by copyright owners. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill is divided into 29 clauses. Clause 1 of the bill sets out the short title of the proposed amendment act. Clause 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, proposes to amend Section 2 of the Copyright Act by incorporating new provisions for the domestication of Marrakesh Treaty, internet service providers' liability, and the resale of royalty rights. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 5 of the Act to clarifying the mandate of the Kenya Copyright Board, while Clause 4 amends Section 6 by recognizing the offices established under the Constitution, namely the offices of the Principal Secretary and the Inspector General of Police. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 5 amends Section 11 of the Act to provide for the appointment of an executive director of the Kenya Copyright Board and sets out the qualifications necessary for a person to be appointed to that office. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 6 of the bill proposes to amend Section 19 of the Act to recognize the constitutional office of the Auditor General. Clauses 7 and 8 of the bill seek to amend the Act to provide for clarity. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 9 of the bill proposes to introduce a new Section 22A into the Act to provide for the voluntary registration of copyrights by the owners, authors, assignees, or exclusive licensees, and for the board to keep records of such a persons in a publicly available register, subject to such terms as the board may determine. Clause 10 of the bill proposes to repeal Section 26 of the Act and replace it with a new clause that expands and clarifies the extent of fair dealing in respect of copyright materials in literally, musical, artistic, and audiovisual works. Mr. Speaker, Clause 11 proposes to insert new sections 26A to 26D to make provisions for artist resale rights for visual artists. Mr. Speaker, Clause 12 of the bill intends to amend Section 28 of the Act to clarify and facilitate the operationalization of a blank tape fee in respect of the copyright in sound recordings. Clause 13 of the bill proposes to repeal Section 29 of the Act and substitute it with a new Clause 29 that refreshes the nature of copyright in podcasts for clarity. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 14 of the bill proposes to amend Section 30 of the bill as consequential and amendment.
Mr. Speaker, the Copyright Protection Bill, Mr. Speaker, is quite handy because we have under so many artists and producers and people with intellectual rights which have been infringed in one way or the other. And sometimes some of these bright Kenyans are put off their business or their careers because of the infiltration and piracy of their works. And therefore this bill, Mr. Speaker, has the clauses, with the new clauses which have been already inserted in, they will at least curtail, if not completely render or stop this menace of poaching or infringement of people's rights, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, I support the bill because there will be a board which will be sitting and which will be vetting and will be licensing, particularly those people who need to be incorporated in this act, and therefore with that board in place, before anybody goes into or anybody who does anything which is envisaged in this act, Mr. Speaker, should go to the board, and more so So for them not to, for the board to be sure that its membership is kept abreast and they know who is on it, Mr. Speaker, there will be a fee which will be paid, Mr. Speaker, which is in the Act, and also there is also a clause where they will need to be licensed. Every year you'll have a certificate which is renewable every year, so that at least you will be known that you are a member of the society or that particular group, and if at all you fail, then you are fined, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I find that one very in order, because to keep sanity in the industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also the penalties have been increased to some degree, which some of them are punitive, and therefore, once somebody thinks of trying to copy or to infringe into other people's works, you think twice, Mr. Speaker, because there's a fine of 400,000 or imprisonment of 10 years, which is not a small, which is quite a number of years, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I find it quite punitive, to the extent that many people think twice before you go to that one. Mr. Speaker, also, there has been times when there have been cases, a case is decided under this Act, the offender is charged and convicted, but whatever was the exhibit or whatever was in question is left, maybe it is left with the police, or it's left with, maybe with other people, and the same infringement continues, Mr. Speaker. But this Act, Mr. Speaker, has come up with a clause that once somebody has been convicted of an offense in this Act, even the materials used as exhibits or which were classified, they should also be destroyed, Mr. Speaker, so that the same thing or the same rot should not continue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is also that there should be royalties paid. If somebody accepts his works or our works to be used by other people, then you are given that leeway by the Act, and in the process, you will charge your royalties, which will be quantified, and once you pay, then you will be a bona fide user of those works, Mr. Speaker. That will do anything you want, because you will have been licensed on the same, Mr. Speaker. The Act there, it is quite clear, and therefore it is it's quite good. Mr. Speaker, these many clauses, as many as they are good for the industry, and they will tame the overzealous people who are out there to ruin others' businesses because they are not ready to do things on their own. More so, the law will be softer, even for the courts, for magistrates, and even for the board, because they will have got references and clearly spelled penalties and the procedures to be followed when dealing with these matters, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill, the copyright amendment bill, and for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I second.
Honorable members, I will propose a question, which is that the copyright amendment bill, National Assembly Bill number 33 of 2017, be read a second time. Honorable Hurufo, order. Member for Isiolo North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the amendment. I think basically most of the amendments are meant to align the acts with provisions of various legislations. For example, like the Basic Education Act. The old act was making reference to the earlier Education Act, and so on and so forth. And as Kenyans, I think it's important for us to appreciate that there's a lot of creativity, particularly amongst our youth. But at the same time, we are also not seeing the youth benefiting from their creativity, particularly those who are in creative arts. And part of the reason why that is happening is because there is a lot of infringements on their rights, and I'm sure most of these proposed amendments are going to address the limitations of the old law in terms of protecting the rights of these creative Kenyans. I particularly want to make reference to a new insertion in the Act 46B, which talks about collective management organization. We also know that at times, when you allow these creative Kenyans to form organizations for collective bargaining, they can be taken advantage of because upcoming artists do not have ability to organize themselves and probably to bargain collectively. So scrupulous business people can pretend to be part of them and take advantage of them. So one particular aspect which I would like to speak to and which has really impressed me in these amendments is provision where the board is going to look critically at collective management organizations in terms of what they do, how they operate, occasionally also looking at their work, and if probably they are not following the law as provided, then there is provision to take action against the directors and so on and so forth. And therefore, I stand here as a member who represent constituencies where there is a lot of creativity which are not nurtured, and which at times, because of lack of laws like the amendments which is being proposed and under this bill, are not benefiting from their creativity, I stand to support these amendments. Thank you very much.
The member wanting to speak must get into the system. The member for Isiro Central, you had, but Mandela South, you got it right. Yes, member for Mandela South, Ali Haji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to state from the onset that I am also in support of this amendment. Basically, the amendment seeks to align the old bill of 2001 to new constitutional dispensation. This bill also takes care of persons with disabilities and persons with special needs. And that is one of the reasons why basically I stand here today to support this amendment. The amendment, as it has been already stated, also safeguards against piracy through internet. The mushrooming of the internet use, and in this digital era, basically what we need is a firm legislation that inhibits scrupulous people who get into access and misuse the property rights of artists. I'm also particularly impressed with the amendments because it also seeks to protect the intellectual property rights and safeguard against also misuse and abuse. For example, in the fields of literature, music, and arts. Copyright owners lose millions of dollars each year to piracy. And so one of the things that I'm also equally impressed with this amendment is that it also seeks to protect the copyright owners, those who rightfully worked so hard to come up with the labels, the products, and the brands that are unique to them, and that they then be able to reap the benefit of their hard work. So this amendment bill equally really takes care of these artists in terms of not losing millions of shillings to unscrupulous fellas. Other provisions which have been amended that seeks to incorporate new provisions in the internet and IP use is also welcome. Clause 3 amends Section 5, which equally is something that we should be proud of. These amendments, as they have been presented today, are timely. As you are aware that our renowned artists, like Mzee Ojwang, lived in abject poverty. because of this infringement of the right of these artists, they were not able to reap maximum benefit from their works while they lived in this world. So many Kenyans have fallen victims to international exploitations, and our popular brands such as Kikoi are copyrighted in UK. Words like safari, for example, are words that we can protect, but they are often used elsewhere in the world. This amendment, also this bill, seeks to update terminologies from the old order, such as principal secretary, permanent secretary to principal secretary. We have minister now being called cabinet secretary. We have auditor general now called the office of the auditor general. We have commissioner of police now in the new constitution referred as to inspector general. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, many other amendments, many other clauses in this amendment bill insert new sections that also give rise to probably visual artists, so that their rights are also taken care of. Others are basically for operationalization of the fees, licenses, and others to repeal the sections of the Act that seeks to improve the bill further. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I would like to support this amendment bill of the copyright bill of 2017. Thank you.
And clear framework on how to protect their royalties, and how to protect their creative ideas, how to assist in the catalyzing of design, development, packaging, and the rebroadcast and airing of their materials, including distribution, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, I'm very excited to read the bill and to identify a few amendments that have been put in the bill that will actually bring soberness, upholding the rights of the creative category of people in our society. I'm more excited because I do know that piracy has been a vice that has truly driven many artists home. Not only home, but home under depression, bankruptcy, and such many other vices that make productive Kenyans not to give their best. I'm more particularly concerned because we have had so many artists. When I say artists, I mean producers of music, the owners of rights of music, who have suffered quite infringement when we get to understand that there's a lot of piracy happening in our neighboring country, and more specifically in Tanzania, where we have a lot of music produced, has given a clear guideline and a framework on how to protect artists from the piracy aspects of the industry. I'm also very, very excited because the bill seeks to promote fair dealing. We have had a lot of tussles. We have seen a lot of demonstrations in our city, Nairobi, where artists have been demonstrating that there are certain category of corporate clients who have not been honoring their pledges in terms of what is supposed to be paid. So the aspect of promotion of fair dealing in the media industry and education industry when it comes to the production and control and the control of such material serves as a guiding principle of operations in that relevant sector. I'm also very excited about the resale rights that have been defined in the bill, provided what has been provided in the bill, in the amendments, has actually defined what is supposed to be done for resale and what is supposed to be done not for resale. The aspect of streamlining the payments of royalties is a factor that will greatly benefit our actors, our creatives, our performers, our artists and designers. This streamlining is going to actually guide on who is supposed to be paid what and for what period, which has actually been defined very well in the amendment. I want to note
and very clearly notes that the word copyright finally and at last has been defined properly, not only for the copying rights, but other related rights have been considered. Mr. Speaker, sir, having served in the industry for quite some time, I would want to bring to your realization that there are many other rights that are supposed to be protected when such people, category of people, are being protected when it comes to the originality of works. There are rights that we call broadcast rights, transmission rights, distribution rights, labeling rights, beneficiary rights, royalty rights, and reprographic rights. I'm excited because all these rights have been touched on the amendments, and therefore this bill is going to really give us a guiding framework on how this sector is going to be operationalized. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to note that the bill not only focuses on the industry of mass media, broadcasting and transmission, it is also touching on our education sector, bearing in mind that we are moving from the traditional arena to the digital age, and the issues of reprographic rights have been ably tackled, and therefore, even as we move to the digital age in our education sector, we shall have the bill guiding us properly. And for those many remarks, or in those many remarks, I seek to support the bill and the amendments therein. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Gitonga, member for Dhaka.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support the amendment bill, which essentially seeks to amend the Copyright Act 2001, which act had repealed the previous Copyrights Act, which was possibly a dead letter law. The reason I say so, it is during the existence of that Copyrights Act when there was lots and lots of piracy in the country, and when Kenya possibly lost most of its intellectual property. This amendment is meant to ensure that the new innovations, which are part of the intellectual property, are actually catered for, and those rights are protected from pirates both in the country and out of the country. There is a raft of amendments proposed, which amendments I fully subscribe to and agree with, and wish to point out that in addition to protecting discoveries, what our citizens have invented, we have also to go to other rights, which are rights derived from the mind, like music. We have also to take care of talents, like in the arts, and all other properties that are bestowed on somebody because you have a gift from God. The proposed amendments establish the body that will deal with intellectual property and copyrights. It also establishes what would happen if there is infringement, and that I do agree with. It's a criminal offense, and the culprits would have to be punished. The punishment should be relatively high because somebody has invented something through his own mind, and somebody else wants to acquire it cheaply and pass it off as his own work. It is that act of passing off which this act tries to cure, tries to deal with, so that whatever it is that is property of the mind is protected from such pirates or passers off. It is important to note that even here in Kenya, as we've been told, we've lost several innovations to outsiders. Kikoi, as mentioned, is one of them. The kiondo, which is a very popular basket with the Bantu communities, was actually patented in Japan, and therefore, whatever it is we want to do with our viondo, chiondo, whatever they are called, in our vernacular, we're not able to do it, because out there, it's property of Japan, and Japan protects that right in a very fervent manner. It is the high time that we looked at our young talents, because in the constituencies, we have these young people who are artists. I mean, they play games, they are entertainers. They were all over during our campaigns. Some of them made very nice music that propelled these members of parliament into this house. If they were all here, I would be debating as to whether really we remunerated them or we just sucked their blood, we just took their music. It propelled us into the house, and that was the end of the chapter. What we are saying is, even we as members of parliament, we had an obligation to remunerate these artists, these music people. We have a right to protect them. We have a right to help them down there. It's an obligation, so that they can also develop into better citizens through their talents. We have also the other example of the Music Society of Kenya, which tries to protect our musicians, but doesn't go very far, in spite of the fact that it has a tribunal, like the one that is being proposed here. But people are there, radio stations, TV stations, name it. Everybody wants to go in, pirate whatever it is these musicians have come up with, and they try to pass it off as their own product. In essence, my support to this bill is due to the fact that, one, the Copyright Act is one of the indigenous laws, what we made ourselves to protect our own rights. Number two, we have repealed an old act which was not very useful to replace it with a newer act, 2001. And finally, we have come to a realization that even the 2001 act is not sufficient for our purposes. We must always be alive to the fact that intellectual property, like all the other technology, information and otherwise, is changing. So constantly, as the August House of Kenya, we will be called upon to be looking at the laws that govern our technology, that govern our intellectual property, whatever other properties we have, information technology and what have you, so that these are safeguarded from time to time. There should be no complaints that I'm the one who invented this and then it was taken by somebody else, and tussles and counter-tussles arise from it. I do support this bill very much and urge the House to be on the lookout so that from time to time we keep this law in tandem with the new developments that are happening in technology. I therefore beg to support.
Honorable Bashane, member for Talbaj.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity again. I stand to support this motion, this amendment, which comes in handy, and it was amended in tandem with the 2010 Constitution. That is a good idea. The second point is that it gives protection to artists and musicians from big corporations, people who don't have the opportunity to defend their copyrights. It gives them this opportunity in this amendment to protect them. Having in mind the ringing tones, people even compose from our traditional point of view. One point I can remember is the lady who normally says "Serikali's idea," which is normally used in Safaricom. I wonder whether that ringing tone is being taken care of and given her rights. I'm also happy that provision of a tribunal is provided in the amendment with an able advocate with 7 years experience. That will give it the knowledge to protect people who will have misused the copyrights. I'm also happy that the exclusive rights will not affect where these rights will be used for education, whereby this information is collected for literary or musical works, and where this is used for teaching purposes, and it's acknowledged. I stand to support the amendment. Thank you very much.
Very well. Honorable members, the member for Tarbaj, is good you added because actually the House needed to rise. Honorable members, the time being 7 p.m. now, this House starts adjourned till Tuesday, 5th December 2017 at 2:30 p.m.